Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'd like to call the Wednesday, April 21st, 2021 Homestead City Council meeting to order. It is 6:06 p.m. Please stand and join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. I'll now read the COVID statement into the record. Pursuant to the City of Homestead COVID-19 local state of emergency and the executive order for hybrid and virtual public meetings dated November 20th, 2020, this will be a hybrid city council meeting in accordance with authorized communications media technology protocols as provided on the city's website and meeting agendas. The hybrid meeting allows for the public to participate live during the hybrid meeting by calling in or through Cisco WebEx or physically appearing. Please note that due to COVID-19, there will be limited occupancy available in the council chambers. Face coverings must be worn by attendees at all times. In addition, the public will be subject to temperature checks and COVID screenings will be required. The hybrid meeting can also be viewed live on the City Access channel or city website at cityofhomestead.com. The city will be accepting public comments as part of the hybrid meeting, which can be emailed to publiccomments@cityofhomestead.com. Public comments are limited to 300 words per comment. Public comments on a specific agenda item should include your name, address, the item you'd like to comment on, and your comment. Such comments can be submitted up until noon Tuesday, April 20th, 2021, and reviewed by the City Council as part of the record. General public comments should also include your name, address, and your comment, and can be submitted up until 30 minutes after the end of this meeting, and will be included in the minutes. Further details and instructions concerning public participation in the hybrid meeting are referenced in the City of Homestead Virtual Meetings Quick Start Guide located on the city's website. Madam Clerk, roll call.
Councilwoman Bailey?
Here.
Councilman Fletcher?
Here.
Councilwoman Avila?
Here.
Councilman Shelley?
Here.
Councilman Roth?
Here.
Vice Mayor Faircloth Staggers?
Here.
Mayor Losner?
Here. Thank you. Madam Manager, are there any additions, deletions, or deferrals?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All right, item 4, tabs 1 through 7 are the consent agenda. We have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move it.
Moved by Councilman Roth.
Second.
Second by Councilman Fletcher. Any further questions or comments from council? All in favor? Aye. Any nays? Next, item 5 on the agenda, public hearings, ordinances, land use items, etc. Mr. White, good evening.
Good evening. Yes, this is the quasi-judicial section of your agenda. Please be advised, following items on the agenda are quasi-judicial in nature. If you wish to comment upon any of these items, please indicate the item number you would like to address when the announcement regarding the quasi-judicial item is made. An opportunity for persons to speak on each item will be made available after the applicant and staff have made their presentations on each item. Swearing in, all testimony, including public testimony and evidence, will be made under oath or affirmation. Additionally, each person who gives testimony may be subject to cross-examination. If you do not wish to either be cross-examined or sworn, your testimony will be given its due weight. The general public will not be permitted to cross-examine witnesses, but the public may request the council to ask questions of staff or witnesses on their behalf. The full agenda packet on each item is hereby entered into the record. Persons representing organizations must present evidence of their authority to speak for the organization. Further details of the quasi-judicial procedures may be obtained from the clerk. In accordance with Code Section 2-591, any lobbyist must register before addressing the council on any of the following items. At this time, council members must disclose any ex parte communications concerning tab 8 on the agenda.
Any disclosures on this item? Appear to be none.
Hearing none, at this time, I would ask the clerk to swear in any persons who wish to testify on tab 8. So at this time, anyone in the audience who wishes to testify, please raise your right hand to be sworn by the clerk.
And nothing but the truth, so help me God. You may be seated. Thank you.
So happy to report the one and only quasi-judicial item tonight is tab 8, which is the second reading of an ordinance of the City of Homestead, Florida, approving the rezoning requested by DC Dental Group, LLC, from Hotel, Motel, and Institutional R4 zoning district to Professional Business Restricted, B1A zoning, for an approximately 0.327 acre parcel of land located at 805 Northwest 1st Avenue, as legally described in Exhibit A, providing for conflict, severability, and an effective date. This is second and final reading.
Thank you, Mr. White. Mr. Cordino?
Yes, sir. The staff recommends that the mayor and council approve the proposed ordinance requesting the rezoning from Hotel, Motel, Institutional R4 to the Professional Business District B1A. The subject property is currently zoned R4, but it's got a future land use map designation of Professional Mixed Use, PMU. The R4 is not consistent with the comp plan designation of PMU. That is implemented by B1A, R1, R2, and R3, and RTH. And this is the three items we're kind of going to go through tonight are very interesting because they lead up to our discussion that we're going to have later on this evening about the code. This is just, it's not a mistake. It's not an accident. These things had come in to the city. The comp plan for this was written in the 70s. It just never included this building that existed as an R4. It existed as an R4 ever as far back as we can remember. If he wants to expand, he's got to come into conformance, and this is the way you come into conformance, by changing your zoning to become consistent with the city's code. So we're recommending approval, and if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer it. And I believe the applicant does have a presentation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Applicant has a presentation.
Okay, so let's roll the presentation from the applicant then.
Hello, my name is Dr. Chokolov, and I'm a general dentist who practices in Homestead, Florida. With this presentation, I would like to introduce you to BC Dental Group, which is the company that owns the real estate associated with my practice. And I would like to tell you more about the rezoning request that I have in regards to that real estate. So, as I stated before, the purpose of this presentation is to introduce you to the real estate and the location of the real estate in question, to give you a brief description of the business that is run on that real estate, and to explain you exactly why I'm seeking rezoning of that property. BC Dental Group is a limited liability corporation with headquarters in Homestead. The address is 83 Northwest 8th Street, Homestead, Florida, which is the exact same address as 805 Northwest 1st Avenue. It's just that the property has two different entrances, so based on the entrance you use, you can have two different mailing addresses. The property is located one block west of Chrome Avenue. It is on Campbell Drive, downtown Homestead. The only purpose of the BC Dental Group company is to own the real estate associated with my dental office. Currently, the lot has one-story building, which is occupying the west side of the lot. The building is approximately 1,700 square feet, and it has three entrances, two that are from 8th Street, and one entrance that is from Northwest 1st Avenue. The building is occupied by Homestead Dental, and it is functioning as a dental office. It has been functioning as a dental office since the 1960s. As I said in the previous slide, the dental office has been in existence since the 1960s, initially owned by Dr. Ryan and then Dr. Spinelli. In 2009, I acquired the building and the real estate and established Homestead Dental at this location. BC Dental Group is the owner of the real estate. The office is not very big. It has 4 dental rooms, a waiting room, front desk, obviously, a bathroom, sterilization room, a storage room, a lab, and a little break room. Currently, the office has 6 employees, including me, 2 hygienists, 2 front desk, and a dental assistant. On this slide, you can see a bird view of the property. As you can tell, the west side of the lot is occupied by the small building, and the east side is just covered by grass. There's a small parking lot in the middle. Finally, I would like to talk to you about the purpose of this rezoning request. The current zoning of the property is hotels, motels, and institutional, which is obviously not in line with the current use of the property. Why is this like this? I have no idea. All I know is that I have been grandfathered into this zoning ever since I purchased the practice, and Dr. Spinelli has also been grandfathered into this. I am not sure if the code has changed or what has happened in the past. Our request currently is to rezone the property from this hotels, motels, and institutional to a professional business restricted zoning, B1A, which specifically allows the use of the land as a dental office, as a professional institution. We seek this rezoning because the office is expanding as the population of Homestead is expanding, and the 4 rooms we have is starting to feel a little bit too small and too cramped. In order for us to better serve the community, a good idea for the future would be to expand the current building or to just build a new office. Of course, this is going to happen at a later point, and I'm not seeking any approvals for any building construction or any of that nature. I just am trying to align the current use of the building, which is dental office, to the proper zoning, so that the future expansion can be considered if such need arises. Finally, I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to explain my request, and I hope that my request to rezone the property gets granted. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Dr. Chokoloff and his staff for that presentation. Any initial questions or comments from council? All right. Is there anyone either in the audience or online wishing to speak on this application?
None online.
All right, I see none in the audience then. I'll close the public hearing and I'll entertain a motion for approval of this rezoning request. Second reading.
Move it.
Moved by Councilwoman Bailey.
Second.
Second by Councilman Roth. Any final comments from council? None appearing. Let's have a roll call vote, Madam Clerk.
Councilman Roth? Councilman Fletcher?
Yes.
Councilwoman Avila?
Yes.
Councilman Shelley?
Yes.
Councilwoman Bailey?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Faircloth Staggers?
Yes.
Mayor Losner?
Yes.
The motion carries.
All right. Thank you. That concludes the quasi-judicial portion of the agenda. We're now at item 6, legislative matters, tab 9, car number 3154. Mr. Pearl?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Tab 9 is an ordinance for first reading. It's an ordinance of the City of Homestead, Florida, renaming the amended plat of Tatum's Colortown Addition to Homestead, Florida, filed for recordation on January 21st, 1924 in Dade County, Florida, pursuant to page 12 of Volume 9 of the Book of Plats, to the amended plat of Tatum's Addition to Homestead, Florida, pursuant to Section 177.142 of the Florida statutes, authorizing transmittal, providing for conflicts, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you, Mr. Pearl. Is there a staff report on this matter? Mr. Cordino?
Yes, sir. We're recommending approval of this proposed ordinance renaming the platted subdivision. Again, this is another thing that kind of leads us to our future conversation about the code. At some point in time, somebody felt it was appropriate to write a plat that it was entitled Amended Plat of Tatum's Colortown Addition to Homestead. That's a racial slur that was put together in the 1920s, and apparently it was appropriate at that point in time, but it's not appropriate any longer. We're allowed to change those things, and we're doing so through this amendment. Through this ordinance, we seek your approval.
Thank you, Mr. Cordino. Questions or comments from council?
Yes, Mayor.
Yes, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, staff, for working on this item. Actually, Corandino, although it came about in 1920, I don't think it was appropriate then, and it's still not appropriate now. Councilman Williams originally raised this concern about the Tatum Colored Town designation, and particularly the times that we're in now is just not acceptable. And I'm happy that we're moving forward in the city of Homestead with eliminating this racial slur as a part of our community. So I ask for my colleagues to support this item tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Well said. All right. Is there anyone either online or in the chambers who would like to speak on this matter?
None online.
All right. None appearing here. Council? All right. We'll close the public hearing then, and I'll entertain a motion for approval.
Move it.
Moved by Councilwoman Avila
But
and second by, I believe, the Vice Mayor. All right. If there's nothing further, we'll have a roll call on this item.
Councilman Fletcher,
Yes.
Councilman Roth,
Yes.
Councilman Shelley,
Yes.
Councilwoman Bailey,
Yes.
Councilwoman Avila,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Faircloth Staggers,
yes.
Mayor Losner.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Next item, tab 10, car number 3155, public hearing number, and this first reading, public hearing number 2020-63, comp plan text amendment. Is this Mr. Pearl?
Mayor.
Or James?
Thank you,
Right.
Mayor. Yes, this tab 10, tab 11, and tab 12, all pertain to modifications to the existing legislative framework that you have now in relation to the Shotgun property Centennial proposed affordable senior housing development. And pursuant to that agreement that the CRA entered into at the end of last year, this proposed comp plan amendment changes modifications to the Southwest Neighborhood Plan as well as to the zoning code were all identified as items that needed to be addended, modified, carving out an exception for increased density for affordable senior housing developments located in this particular area in the Southwest neighborhood. So I can introduce each one of these. I think you can collectively talk about them because they all relate together, public hearing, and then we can take a separate vote on each one of these.
Sure, let's go that route. Thank you.
The first reading is an ordinance of the City of Homestead, Florida, amending the City of Homestead Comprehensive Plan by amending the text of the Planned Urban Neighborhood, PUN, Future Land Use category contained in Objective 2, Policy 2.1, providing for transmittal of this ordinance to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity and all other units of local government or governmental agencies as required under Chapter 163, Part 2, Florida statutes, providing for adoption pursuant to Section 163.3184 Florida statutes, providing for inclusion in the comprehensive plan, repeal of conflicts, severability, and providing for an effective date. Tab 11 is the first reading of an ordinance of the City of Homestead, Florida, amending the Southwest Neighborhood Master Plan by amending general standards and the regulating sub-area zoning regulations for the traditional multifamily neighborhood, providing for conflicts, severability, inclusion in the master plan, and providing for an effective date. And finally, tab 12 is the first reading of an ordinance of the City of Homestead, Florida, amending the Southwest Neighborhood Master Plan. Sorry, that's a Southwest Neighborhood Master Plan by amending the general standards and regulating sub-area zoning regulations for the traditional multifamily neighborhood, providing for conflict, severability, inclusion in the code, and providing for an effective date.
All right, thank you. Mr. Cordino?
Yes, sir. We are recommending that the mayor and council approve the amendments to all three of the plans. The interesting thing here is that we have multiple layers of regulation that we need to go through here. There is the comp plan, which guides everything. We need to make sure the comp plan and the zoning are consistent. The zoning resides in the city's code, which is here. This is a kind of an overlay district on top of the regular zoning, which is Southwest Neighborhood. Inside that, there are a set of parallel zoning districts and uses parallel to what exists in the primary zoning districts of the city code. So you have comp plan, zoning code, uses, districts uses, Southwest Neighborhood, districts uses, and then you have a Southwest Neighborhood master plan, which must be changed at the same time you're changing the Southwest Neighborhood zoning code, which is inside the original city code for zoning. So all those things are being done. This is simply to go through all that just to make sure that we have a single residential parcel that is designated the proper designation, sub-area, traditional multifamily neighborhood. What it does is it makes sure that this can be used as senior housing as long as it's restricted for exclusively seniors and elderly. And what it does is increases the density from either 15 or 20 units an acre to 30 units an acre. So it's 1.5 to 2 times the density permitted in the original code and the Southwest Master Plan. So we're recommending approval.
Thank you, Mr. Cordino. Questions for council? Questions? Just to clarify, though, I want to put it on the record that these changes are very laser focused to the parcel commonly referred to as the shotgun parcel. Is that correct? Or could we have a situation where someone else came in, bought up a block of land, and came in with a proposal for elderly housing?
No, you're correct. That's laser focused for that specific property.
Very good, thank you. All right, is there anyone either online or in the audience who wishes to speak on either items 10, 11, or 12?
Mr. Mayor, I need to correct myself. It's for that property. It's specific to the sub area, but not specific to that property. So anywhere where we see the sub area, which is urban, the planned urban neighborhood, traditional multifamily neighborhood inside the Southwest Neighborhood Master Plan, even though this is tailored for that location, the shotgun property, anywhere that has that land use designation, it will now be allowed to be 30 units an acre.
Provided they come in with
Elderly housing.
Yeah.
For my money then, before we have second reading, I'd kind of like to have a handle on what the potential sites would be within that sub area, within that designation. What our worst case scenario might be. I mean, I'm not asking you to go find it tonight. I know that's, a
Got
lot
it.
to ask for at this point. But just so, for my edification between now and second reading.
Yes, sir, we'll make sure you have that.
Just so, want to be sure we're not really opening up that Pandora's box of widespread density of 1.5 to 2 times of I think what we all had anticipated would be, but for this particular proposal. All right, so no one online, no one in the audience. I think further from council. Then do we have a motion to approve on first reading tab 10?
Move it.
Second.
Moved by, was that Avila? Seconded by Councilman Roth. Mr. Fletcher, were you trying to move or did you have a question? Okay, all right. All right. There's nothing further then. We'll have a roll call vote on tab 10, first reading.
Councilman Shelley,
No.
Councilwoman Bailey, Councilman Rawl, Councilman Fletcher,
Yes.
Councilwoman Avila, Vice Mayor Fairclough Staggers,
Yes.
Mayor Losner.
Yes, pending the information I requested.
Motion carries.
All right. All right, so I need a motion for approval now on tab 11. Councilman Fletcher?
Move tab 11.
Move tab 11 by Councilman Fletcher. Second by Councilwoman Bailey. Nothing further from council. I have a roll call vote on tab 11.
Councilwoman Avila, Councilman Shelley, Councilman Fletcher,
Yes.
Councilman Roth,
Yes.
Councilwoman Bailey,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Fairclough Staggers,
Yes.
Mayor Losner.
Yes.
The motion carries.
And then a motion for approval on tab 12, the related item.
Move it.
Moved by Councilman Roth.
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Avila. Roll call?
Councilman Roth,
Yes.
Councilwoman Bailey,
Yes.
Councilwoman Avila, Councilman Shelley,
No.
Councilman Fletcher,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Fairclough Staggers,
Yes.
Mayor Losner.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Cordino, Mr. White. All right. Agenda item number 7, tab 13, car number 3158. The moment we've all been waiting for, the Development Services presentation.
Thank you. Before I get started, I looked that up in our books. It'll affect about 30 acres of land. The current property is about 5 acres. There's about 30 acres that this would impact. Okay, ready? All right, perfect. Thank you. Well, I appreciate this. Like you said, it's the moment we've all been waiting for. So I've put together a brief presentation. It should be fairly quick. It's relatively thorough, however, and what we hope to do tonight is talk to you about, well, first off, let me say, what we're about to get into is a little bit complex. It can be somewhat difficult. So what I wanted to do was kind of frame the conversation so that you guys had as much information as you possibly could have to have a conversation amongst yourselves about what the best course of action is here. And if you have any questions for us, because we work with it every day, we are completely prepared to answer those questions. So what I wanted to do was talk about what development services is. What do we do? How do we do it? Our processes, and then some recommendations. And those recommendations range from some things that are relatively quick and simple to do, a moderate step, and then something that's more complicated and in-depth. And just to give you a range of options for how one might want to get started. So what is development services? Really, development services are three different divisions of a department. There is the planning division. This is the division that essentially gives anybody who wants to build something in the city of Homestead the right to build it. And not only, it's not a fully developed city, so it's not like we're dealing with the built environment all the time where somebody's coming in and just doing a site plan replacing an existing use. A lot of times we're developing for the first time land. So we're bringing it into the comp plan, usually from an agricultural designation. It sits there, it gets redeveloped, it changes over comprehensive plan, zoning, we give it a comp plan, we give it a zoning designation, it then gets an entitlement. An entitlement is a value necessarily, like 30 units an acre or something like that. That's a number that you can put on it, a height, a units, a density, a floor area ratio, those types of things. And we run it through a pretty extensive process that ultimately ends up in this room with you all making the decision on whether this can be, is appropriate or not appropriate. After that, it goes to the building department. And the building department then begins to look at how this thing is actually constructed. So they receive permits, they approve those permits, the constructor goes out there and builds it, we go and inspect it to make sure that it's safe, and then we give them a certificate of occupancy, and then it goes to the business licensing division to where it gets a business tax receipt to do its job, and then we monitor it from there on. So that's in a nutshell what we do. We've got about 22 different employees. We've got in planning 2 technical people in planning, 3 administrative people in building. We've got about 12 full-time people, 4 part-time people, 1 person in business tax receipts. As we've looked this up, we're operating with basically the same staff we had about 15 years ago, or when the city was about 25,000 people. We have over 70,000 people now, basically the same staff. Many of them are non-technical. We are operating at basically the staff level of a small 20,000 person city, Cutler Bay, Pinecrest, Palmetto Bay, South Miami, with very little development. We are about a third of the staff that you would see in a comparable city with a comparable number of people and a comparable set of development, like Doral, Miami Gardens, Coral Gables, City of Miami, Miami Beach, those places that process the same level of development. What we do here in the planning department is put together about 110 public hearing applications each year. That means we're in front of you about 110 times or maybe 10 times a month with various applications. Just as a note, we're probably one of the fastest growing cities in all of Miami-Dade County, and probably not only that, but one of the busiest cities in Miami-Dade County. Just as reference, somebody like our neighbors in Palmetto Bay may do 10 public hearing applications a year. We're doing 10 times that amount. Not only that, we're dealing with public records requests, interdepartmental coordination, and then we run the approval process, the Development Review Committee, the Planning and Zoning Board, the Historic Preservation Board, the Public Art Committee. We deal with the Comprehensive Plan, and we deal with the Zoning Code. At the same time, the Building Department does about 7,500 permit applications every year. 5,500 for permits, 24 to 25,000 inspections, 5,000 open permit searches, and over 15,000 customer assistance interactions every year. Again, we're tracking about 3,500 business licenses as well as we go through the process. So, how do we do what we do? I didn't have your wheelbarrow, Mayor, but I did have my cart, and I went around our department and collected stuff to show you. This is the planning department regulates to the city code. This is the city code. We have in charge of about 17 of 32 chapters in this. Building, zoning, planning, each chapter has multiple divisions. We control the content of this. On top of the city code, in the planning department, we deal with a bunch of other stuff. This is the handy-dandy Southwest Neighborhood Plan. We've got our EAR-based amendments. We've got master plans from all over the place. None of this stuff really includes anything east of the turnpike, because that's all in the DRI, and everything that happened in the DRI has its own zoning code, for instance. Honestly, I'm not even sure if anybody knows where a lot of that stuff is. It could be in the basement at Old City Hall or in the thing. This is interesting. I want to pass this to you. That's a zoning map, essentially. Those came out in sections. There are one for each section of land in the city of Homestead. That dates back to circa the 1920s. That is not in the basement of the old city hall. It's not ruined because we use it on a regular basis. It's a working document. We use that as our primary zoning tool until about 2002, where we converted it into our current zoning tool, which produced a GIS map like this that we have kind of on the computer, but we refer back to that every week. And they're all, I mean, there's one for every section of land in the city. You can see that. It is actually a piece of history, but it's also a piece of the technology that we use as we process 110 public hearing applications every year. The building department is regulated by not the city, but the Florida Building Code. That's all of this stuff here, right? Building code, plumbing, mechanical, electric, again, with about a third of the staff that somebody, say, maybe in Doral, may have to do that. We have no control over that content. We can comment on it every year, but we don't have control over it. We can control, as a city, anything we want in these documents. At a moment's notice, just like we did, boom, you can change this and that and whichever you want, but you can't change the Florida Building Code. We had gone through a process a couple of years ago to assess ourselves, and we looked at a number of things about our processes. And what we found was that if you looked at our fees, our application fees, they're comparable to other cities. If you looked at the time that it takes to get through our process, it's about average with other cities in the county. The level of regulation, about the same. Zoning codes, DRCs were behind in technology, obviously, because we don't have an electronic system to manage this. As I told you, we manage our public hearing process, 110 of them, of a whiteboard in the office and a paper map that is the next generation of that thing that I just passed around to you. So we're working with that. We've got an out-of-date code, which is where I'll get to in a moment, and we probably need to revise our processes and procedures. And to go into that in just a little bit more detail, I'm going backwards here. Our planning process is about a 4 to 6 month process. An applicant comes in, and they go through a 3-phase process. The first phase is a staff review. That's what we call the Development Review Committee. That's where we get a complete application, and it goes not only to the planning department, but every department in the city so that they can review it to make sure that nothing gets in the way of this. It's not sitting on top, the dumpsters are in that place, it's not sitting on top of buildings, not on a water main, all types of stuff like that. From there, once we issue comments, and we get the comments returned and we're clear with it and we can go for an approval, it goes to the Planning and Zoning Board, and then it goes to the City Council. All right, that generally takes 4 to 6 months. The building process, a lot more simple in a sense. We have about 30 days to review. Once a permit application is put in, we have about 30 days to review it. Our internal goal is to review the permits within 21 days. Inspections are called. They are held, the vast majority is the very next day. Our time frame is dependent on other agencies to do their work. We have Miami-Dade County Fire Department and Environmental Resources, and I would say that is a group that we are always ahead of. And we're always working with applicants on their behalf to get there. Business tax receipts, we monitor them on a regular basis, particularly once a year. So how much does it cost to get through our system? We measured this against other cities. Believe it or not, that our costs are relatively low. That may be a good thing, but it's probably not a bad thing. We haven't changed the cost for, say, electrical permit or any of this stuff in decades. So this stuff is woefully out of date and doesn't match the contemporary cost that you may see in other cities. That's why our cost is low. We also measured 4 different development scenarios that you would go through, that anybody might go through. We looked at the development of a hotel, a commercial facility, multifamily. This went through a variety of applications. Change the comp plan, change the zoning, get the permits, this, that, and the other thing. In each and every one of them, we were below the average cost in Miami-Dade County for processing and development. For the most part, if you were to do multifamily housing and process that, we're 41% below the average cost that we could find in Miami-Dade County. So I was happy about that. So that's who we are. That's how we operate. That's the technology we operate with. So what are we going to do about it? We've come up with 3 levels of intervention that we could possibly go through here to start to make things run in a way that you're more comfortable with. The first one is relatively simple, and it's fixing the antiquated aspects of the code. And I'll get into this in a little bit depth. It's relatively simple. We kind of know it in our heads. We've been working with this code for close to 12 years now. It's dense. We know where this stuff is. We can find it. We can fix it. And I'll explain in a second. Then after you did that, a more moderate, more difficult thing to do, a more time-consuming thing to do is to amend the administrative processes and procedures of the code. That's where we really need your input on how to do things. Is it fast? Do you want it slow? Do you want it cheap? Do you want it expensive? How does this stuff work? There's a whole bunch of critical decisions in that line of thinking that would need to be done, and your participation is absolutely critical in that. And the final thing is to revise the code to meet contemporary standards. That is a long, expensive process by which would take extraordinary coordination between you all, us, the citizens, the development community, any other stakeholder in town, because what it does is really start to focus on the quality of life and the character of the city of Homestead. So let me go through very briefly the first part of it, just to give you a couple of great examples. Fixing the antiquated or confusing aspects of the code. Again, this can be done relatively easy. We know where this stuff is. First thing, we need to review and streamline our definitions, right? So we have 24 or something sections of zoning code. Each of them has a list of permitted uses. These uses, again, they may have sounded to somebody like a good idea at the time, but they're probably not anymore. A hardware store in our code does not mean the hardware store that you think it means. There is a thing called a millinery, and we can raise our hand. Anybody know what any of this stuff is? Because I had to look almost all of them up. A haberdasher, a ship's chandlery, a bunker oil. Does anybody know what bunker oil is? Bunker oil. When at a ship, when the steamships used to get their fuel from coal, and they had a bunker in the hold of the ship where the guys would go down there and shovel the coal into the burner. And when they converted from steamships after World War II and going into the Second World War, they converted those bunkers into fuel tanks. They still called them bunkers. The fuel that they put in there was called bunker oil, right? And so you can remember your grandfather probably saying bunker oil, like anybody knew what that was. But it's really just boat gas. And so our code tells you where you can and cannot sell boat gas. And it goes through a stringent way to sell boat gas. Again, a lot of this stuff, outside of this antiquated stuff, it's been piecemealed over generations, right? And it can be quite purposely restrictive. In the early 2000s, we have a PUD. We rewrote the PUD regulations to be restrictive, right? It's certainly not developer friendly. It takes 18 months to get through the PUD process. You've got a master plan, you've got a sketch plan, and you've got a site plan that you need to go through. The code says, first off, you've got to do all 3 of these things, right? And you can't do them concurrent with one another, like you may see us come and change the comp plan, the zoning, and site plan at the same time. In our code, it says, no, you have to do them sequentially. So it's a 4 to 6 month process each time. You layer that on itself sequentially, and you've got an 18-month process. Planned unit development is meant to be a flexible a mechanism by which a developer can come in and propose something that doesn't conform to regular zoning, and it gives the city and the developer a little bit more latitude. Ours is restrictive. It takes 18 months to go through the process. The Southwest Neighborhood Code, like we just went through, man, this is the third layer of zoning in this. That, nobody ever liked that code except for the group that wrote it, because I've been here since 2011. The developers don't seem to like it because almost every development needs a variance, just like the one we're contemplating giving with the density. It had told the folks in the neighborhood that really it didn't want them there anymore, in the sense that churches were prohibited at one point. Places got churches in it, churches were no longer allowed. Councilmember Williams had us change it back. Funeral homes were no longer allowed in it. The buildings push up to the front of the street, not the back. Development Services has never, almost every developer wants to do a variance there. We always deny them because there are no hardships. They just want to go into code. The council's never denied the variance in the Southwest Neighborhood. So I can remember one of the council members saying, we want you to approve this. I can't approve it. It's got 11 variances. That's your job. If you want to approve it, or change the code, because nobody likes it, and we should get rid of it. The code has things in it that say, hey, let's make sure that people build things behind walls and under a roof, right? So this is, like, that one guy wanted to do a solar farm. Well, it's got to be behind walls and under a roof. I mean, there's no discretion on behind walls and under a roof, right? So then you get in the DRI, okay, what do you do with Copart? What do you do with Mercedes? What do you do with these guys when the code specifically says behind walls and under a roof, right? It's impossible. So now you can go cite them all day today, because if you go by Lowe's or Home Depot or any hardware store, that stuff's not behind walls or under a roof. Lawnmowers, mulch, all the stuff that's out front, it's really not supposed to be there. So you've got, so like you said, you got that going for you. Here we've got an airport zoning ordinance. We don't have an airport. Then James can explain that better. We've got design guidelines that need to be tinkered with. We've got different articles. It's confusing. You have to go to many of these different books to figure out where you're going with this stuff. There was a great thing that came through yesterday. It was one example. The mayor had sent somebody who wanted to do a cigar bar and a packaged goods store. So we looked it up. I figured, okay, let me go find out what's going on. This guy wants to do a cigar bar and a packaged goods store. How hard could this possibly be? And it's really, you'd think pretty simple, but then you start to look at what we found, and it's absolutely laughable in a sense. So, all right, the guy wants to do a cigar bar and a packaged goods store, and we decide, let's go look at it. So we go, we find out, okay, it's in section 311 of the code. Great, we can get that done. Simple, 311 of the code. And then we realize, wait a minute. It's cigar's not bothering us, but the packaged goods store bothers. It's liquor. We don't give a liquor license. The state gives a liquor license. We have no control. The state gives it or the state doesn't give it. You can't really deny it if the state gives it. But either way, our code says, you got to go to the city council anyway. So on something that's perfunctory that the state will check off on and the guy can open his doors, we say, no. You got to go through our public hearing process, which is application, DRC, Planning and Zoning Board, City Council, 4 to 6 months, right, for something that we can't deny. Okay, all right, so let's go through that. And then we realize, oh, no, my gosh, now our code also says that you've got to go through 2 certificates of use. You've got to do a distance requirement and an hours waiver requirement. So we now are processing 4 different application types to get something we can't necessarily deny through the system. Not only that, we are in an overlay district. Does anybody know we have an antique/arts and entertainment district, right? And so so that obviously is very old, because I'm not quite sure when the market or the demographic for antiques and arts and entertainment were the same thing, but I think of my grandparents all the time when I read this code, because it says bunker oil and stuff. So me and my grandmother could go have a whole day together shopping for antiques and getting entertained. And moreover, we've also said that it's okay during the week for you to drink alcohol between 8 a.m. and 3 a.m., right? But if you're going to drink on a Sunday, we've decided that if you go to the cigar lounge, you have to stop drinking at Sunday at 1 a.m., not 3 a.m., right? Moreover, if you're in the cigar lounge, you can start drinking on Sunday at 10. You can start drinking beer at 10, but you shouldn't, or you can't. You can't start drinking alcohol until 5 p.m., as if beer doesn't contain alcohol. But if you go to the package store, you can get the beer and alcohol at noon on Sunday. But in the package store, you've got to stop getting all your alcohol by 8 p.m. on Sunday. But you can go back to the cigar bar and drink until 1. So I don't know where we got this code, but it's enough. Now, so an applicant will walk in the door and ask us this question. This is all summarized because it was neatly concealed in about 1,000 words in 3 different places in this book, which we had to go ferret out. Obviously, when we tell somebody this, they're going to be a little irritated that we have all these rules on them. But there's no discretion on you can start drinking beer at 10 a.m. I mean, it's a definite time. So this code, that's one example that we came across yesterday. There are hundreds of them in this code, and it's literally from a different era. So the other sections that we can deal with are the amendments to our policies and procedures. These also have no impacts to the community character. They're moderately complicated. These do require city council action, and they do require that we really think about what we want to do because they change the way essentially that development services does things. For instance, these are not recommendations. These are things we could do to speed the process. There's a such thing as of right approvals. For instance, many places, the city of Miami's new code is almost all administrative. Anytime a development comes in and he does not need a variance, it's an administrative process. It doesn't have to go to a planning and zoning board. It doesn't have to go to a city council. I mean, if we did that, we could knock some of this stuff out in 30 days, not 4 to 5 months. We just did amend the variance procedure. We have a code that says you have to prove a hardship if you get a variance. And hardship cannot be financial. And the hardship is essentially 7 criteria that we go through that the applicant must meet all 7 criteria. And so you can ask any of the land use attorneys that come through here and they'll tell you it's almost impossible without an irregularly shaped piece of land for any applicant to get a hardship in any city, not just the city of Homestead, right? But you don't need a hardship criteria. You can just change that to a more subjective criteria that is the standard of proof is much lower, and we can move people much quicker, much less expensively through the system. We've got transportation concurrency methodology that was built, again, in that period of the late 2000s where it seemed like we were trying to put the clamps on development. It's one of the most onerous traffic methodologies in the county. Transportation concurrency isn't even a necessity anymore. It's a choice by the cities. This thing, it probably costs a developer $20,000, $25,000 to do the traffic impact analysis. That's not to the city of Homestead. That's just to go hire the traffic engineer to do the methodology. We could get rid of that and go with what other cities have done and just simply do a mobility fee where we do a calculation, figure out what a trip costs. They do a trip generation literally in 15 minutes, and the city, then they pay the city, and the developer moves on. Developers love it because they don't have to hassle with this stuff. I mean, even if they paid $20,000 in impact fees, it's less than their traffic study, and they save themselves a lot of time. We have a site plan reinstatement policy. So, for instance, a guy does a site plan, he doesn't act on it, it expires 12 months, he comes in the next day. Well, to get that same site plan approved, it's got to go all the way back through the city council again, and it's another 6 months. we're going to, as soon as the art committee gets its master plan, we're going to add them, we are compelled to, through code, add them to the rotation of the meeting. So it'll be DRC, planning and zoning, PAC, and then city council, which is going to add time and money to the process. You may not need, well, you do not need a planning and zoning board. You can act as the local planning agency yourself, remove that completely from the three level steps, and your local planning agency would simply review comp plan and zoning amendments. Many cities do not have a planning and zoning board, would save you time and money as you go through. Again, we think that we can rewrite the plan unit development rules, amend the site plans, all types of conditional uses that maybe shouldn't be there so that we can approve a lot of this stuff very quickly, administratively. Again, unless it needs a variance or something like that, there's really you can't really deny it. We've also thought of a number of other things that we could do to explain ourselves better. Again, these are complicated for people with master's degrees and decades of experience to go through. And so we have various levels of a developer that will come in. So Amazon came through, how long did it take?
6 months.
6 months, they're through. But they got the public hearing for, they're almost done the process, right? Because they have lawyers that get paid like God only knows what. But then again, we also deal with the guy that owns the restaurant on this corner store. He has no $100, $700 an hour lawyer. Nobody can process all this stuff. And we need to explain things better to them, like the change of use, right, is a pain. What we thought we should be doing now is maybe get our list of frequently asked questions. Let's do, and it doesn't have to be us do it, it could be you guys that do it. We'll write a script for the answer for what's a change of use. And then somebody can do that on the TV channel, and then we have this answer that they could go to the internet, oh, change of use, boom, and there's the mayor explaining what a change of use is, and in easily understood terms so that everybody understands it, and you don't have to run around chasing people with I mean, 'cause I think all of us have had terribly too long conversations about change of use one way. We can do that about permitting. We can explain the planning process that way. Look, I've asked the manager, send in secret shoppers into your department. Just do it. We should be training our people. We talk every week about the way we want to handle customers. I call it a concierge level of service or a Ritz-Carlton level of service. That being said, the training that happens is internal. We've not sent our folks, you don't get to work at the Ritz-Carlton and just walk in off the street and start being nice to people and handing out towels and directly, right? There's a way to do that. They go through extensive training. We should also consider those options as well. And finally, before I wrap this up, the most complex thing we could fix here, which takes lots of time and money, is bringing the entire zoning code, comp plan, everything up to contemporary standards. It takes a lot of time. There are a lot of unintended consequences with that. We need to talk with the development community, you all, to understand what we're doing, because what it does is change the character and the quality of life of the community. We would talk about diversity of housing stock. We would talk about density, floor area ratios, heights, commercial and residential areas, mixed use, signs, all those types of things. And codes these days are not, when you see a code like ours with all the uses and the very specific uses, the rule on those is if you don't see that listed, then it's not allowed. So if it doesn't say cigar bar haberdasher, if that's not, you're not in the list, then it's not allowed. But what do you do with it? So codes now are very vague. And they say retail commercial, right? Obviously, retail is just something that was manufactured somewhere else and sold on site. So you're no longer distinguishing between lawnmower sales and hardware stores. It's just retail, and it simplifies this stuff immensely. So I've gone on way longer than you expected me to, and longer than I was allowed to, but I took the personal preference since I'm here. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions, or not. You can discuss amongst yourself. Thank you for indulging.
Thank you, Mr. Cordino. That's really very comprehensive and the long-term look and comprehensive look that I think we've all recognized needs to happen, and we walk a real tightrope, as you said. The unintended consequences. I just want to give some background of this discussion to my council colleagues in case they weren't aware. I'm sure we've all heard various complaints either as to the timing, the times consumed, and the cost expended for development approvals, as well as issuance of permits, inspection issues, delays, etc. You know, and I'll be the first one to say there's always at least two sides to every story, and it's very important that we recognize that. But be that as it may, it's been, what, about 3 months ago now, Mr. Cordino, when several members of the development and construction community, you know, from the small, you know, 1 or 2 person electrician shop to representatives of Lennar and D.R. Horton and land use attorneys that are well-known and long-standing in their field, all came together and kind of aired their concerns. I think we had at least 40 in attendance. I think a lot of good came out of that, and that was the impetus for this presentation tonight. One thing I do want to note, though, you talked about, okay, so we're at the same staff level we were 15 years ago, and put it in terms of population. Well, 15 years ago, I think we probably had the comparable amount of growth and construction going on as we do today. So I don't know that, you know, population other than, you know, little Joe and Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner needing to do little things in terms of those permits. But one thing that jumped out at me at the beginning, you talked about building staff handled public records requests, 5,000 public records requests. Is that separate and apart from the clerk's office, or what's the nature of that, and how did that end up in the building department?
Do you want to answer that?
Sure. A lot of the public records requests. Good evening, Mayor, council people.
Thank you. Hi.
A lot of the public records requests involve land transactions, folks looking for.
Don't be scared.
A lot of the public records requests revolve around land transactions. We get approximately 50 requests a week for open permit searches, for property records. Do you have the plans for my home? Do you have any information on my property? Most recently, I think we did a count of last week. We had over 75. And that's why we get involved.
Okay, and that also includes, let's say, the issuance of lien letters?
It doesn't involve multiple departments when it gets into liens. It involves our code compliance department, involves zoning and land use approval information, but a lot of it has to do with site-specific property information because of a real estate transaction.
Good, thank you. And I'll ask Mr. Cordino and the manager, have we identified software programs that perhaps would be beneficial? It's kind of takes me aback that with all the technology we have, that we still have that the whiteboard. At least it's not a blackboard. What would be the cost and the time to implement that?
Mayor, approximately about a year ago, we did go out for RFP for a software package for development services. We did get, I want to say about 5 or 6 responses. The price ranged from $1.4 million to $2.3 million to go ahead and revamp their software. Time period that it would take, I would say it would probably take 18 to 24 months to go ahead and do the conversion, because we have to convert the data. Also, there's a lot of configuration that's involved, as well as staff time learning the new system, configuring the system, and like I said, conversion of the data. What we ended up doing was throwing out all those bids, and I believe, Michelle, if I'm not mistaken, we're meeting with the software company that handles Miami-Dade County at this time to take a look at their software and to get some possible pricing as well.
Thank you. Have we, I assuming, Mr. Cordino, Pinecrest has software or Palmetto Bay or no? Some of our closer by cities?
Mayor, everybody's got software but us.
Everybody has software but us, okay. With a fraction of the work to be done.
With a fraction of the work to be done. Doral's got software, and they've got 3 times as many planners and processing the same brand new big downtowns, big stuff. I mean, if you looked on their website, you'd be very impressed. But that's what you can do with technology and staff. By the way, I have to say that this staff is top notch. I mean, we have a very experienced people. I myself have been doing this as a development services director for just about every city in Miami-Dade County at one point in time or the other, helped many cities get started, and for 3 decades have been doing this stuff for those other people. David Hennis is a director-level planner who's been a director not only here in Miami-Dade County, but in other parts of Florida. And most recently, he's been out in San Diego County, California, doing this, and he was, again, we have to have him tested, but he did come back, and I'm not quite sure why. And Linda, as a woman in a male-dominated building official, one of the few female building officials in all of Miami-Dade County, a totally conflict-oriented environment if anybody's ever done development, and she's one of the best there is. By the way, these guys, they work while they're on vacation. I've been on calls with them while they're in Europe, dealing with development services issues while they're on vacation, while they're trying to be with their kids at nights and with weekends. So, you know, it's a wonder that your complaint load out of 110 things and 35,000 other things, your complaint load should probably be 5 times as much if you didn't have this crack staff on board doing what they do each and every day.
One of your slides talked about, I think, 3 different broad category means for solving the problem. I think one was amend the antiquated code, revise the code to meet contemporary standards, and amend the administrative process. In my thinking, if we focus first on fixing the code and revising the code, would that, in your opinion, have the effect of so dramatically lessening the need to go through the process that maybe, you know, amending the process and procedures would be the third level, because if we do the right revisions, we have far fewer instances of people having to come into the approval process. I mean, isn't that part of the goal, that, you know, matter of right?
Yes, sir. I think there's a combination that you can do. I think that relatively simply amending our process and thinking about how to do that. And I don't think that's all that hard, right? Do you really need to stumble on it, have a planning and zoning board? Maybe not. But maybe you do. I mean, that's a lot of places don't. I mean, these are personal preferences on your all's behalf. Certain things like as of right development. Again, if you can't deny it, what do you want? We can give you a report, but you can't deny it. So what are you gonna do? You're just making them go through 6 months of process, and then you've got code. That's process, right? DRC, planning and zoning, city council, right? Then you've got code that says the guy just wants to do a cigar bar and a thing. I mean, it should be approved in 30 days, but it's a 4 application process that with a code that's so confusing that, you know, we've got, I don't know, 2 attorneys, 2 planners, and we're like, holy crap, how do we figure this stuff out? So we got to weed all that stuff out of the process, right? You can't have 4 different times where you allow the public to drink. I mean, like the Puritans didn't even do it that way.
Mayor, if I may, Mayor,
Yes.
were you suggesting Joe's final fix to actually go in and revise the entire code? Because that's the most expensive and the most time consuming. what I think Joe is suggesting, that there are some things that could be done relatively quickly, unless I'm hearing you wrong, Mayor.
I wouldn't touch the final aspects of the code, the most complicated aspect of it, the revisions of the code, because in my mind, what that deals with are things that that you all have to reconcile in your head, like density. The density doesn't matter. It doesn't slow people down, right? If the density's whatever it is what it is. That doesn't stop us the way I process. What impacts us is the process. Do we have to go through these steps, and are the things that we're regulating to so complicated unnecessarily? Again, the cigar bar. Why does it need 4 applications? That doesn't impact density. That doesn't really impact quality of life whatsoever. It's almost rewriting the uses in the zoning code without impacting heights, densities, those types of things. Some of it meshes together, but some of it doesn't. We could simplify enough to where you might get a lot of people off this crazy hook of 6 months and then 4 applications. I mean, it could be $16,000 to get the cigar bar done. Of course the guy's going to go away, but there's no discretion in this code for me to deal with that. I mean, it says the guy's got to open at 3. I mean, if it said the guy's got to open in the afternoon, I could deal with it, but I can't deal with he's got to do a certificate of use. He's got to, I mean, it says this in the book. I mean, the river of blood starts. That's where the river of blood starts in that code.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Fletcher.
So I purposely didn't look at this tab. I wanted to hear what your presentation was tonight. And as you were talking, I wrote down tons of questions. A lot of them you've answered, but I want to make sure that the public understands this as well. But to me, it sounds like the process that we're using is broken.
Say that again?
The process that we are using is broken.
No, sir.
I disagree. If it takes 6 months to get something done that should take 30 days, the process is broken.
No, the many cities, our process is not vastly different from any other process in Miami-Dade County. I mean, everybody has a staff review. Many people have advisory boards. Some of them have historic preservation boards. Some of them have architecture boards, and all of them have city councils. Now, if your goal is to get something done in 30 days, we can craft a way for you to get stuff done in 30 days. You can streamline the process. I wouldn't say it's broken. What you're doing is perfectly acceptable, and it's done in the vast majority of cities in Miami-Dade County. Now, when they want to streamline it, they've cut pieces out of it or added pieces to it.
So, based on my discussion with individuals that have called me over the last few days, again, they think the process is broken because it takes time and money to get time and additional money to get these things done. With that being said, I do have several questions that I think ultimately, it's going to come to a decision from us. But, again, I think you've provided some of the ways we can streamline the process here tonight. What I would like staff to do is prioritize that list, 1 to 100, which items do we want to tackle first to make your jobs easier, number one, and to make the community be able to understand that the process is a little simpler than it can be, okay? So if you were king for a day and you could make the changes you wanted, that's the prioritized list that we need to see to give us a better option up here to make a decision.
Okay.
Then we need to look at scheduling meetings for us to adopt those items. We need to look at meetings to scheduling. I'm sorry, I don't care for this too much. We need to look at meetings to adopt these process improvements. I think it's important right now that we update the city code. We've talked about this in the past. I think the last meeting that I was in public here over a year ago, we talked about the city code and how it needs to be updated. I would like the staff to provide us with a very good RFP on what that actual cost is. I think the timing to do that is now. We have lots of things going on in this city. I think we need to look at utilizing potential reserve funds to get this city code fixed. Again, my opinion, but we'll address that as we move forward. But we need to be able to quantify that cost so we can make that determination. And again, I think we owe it to the community and the folks that want to do business in this town to update and make everything up to date at this point in time. That's all I have at this time, Mr. Mayor, but we have to fix this. You know, we have to stop the complaints that we're getting on a routine basis and make this city more streamlined to do business with. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Roth?
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'd like to start off with saying it's really nice to see David here, Michelle, and Linda Blanco, the building official. I think it's been like a year.
It has been.
Since we've seen you guys here. So I can't imagine what you've been going through, working from home and trying to get things done. And I understand, I think we're going to be opening up here soon, I think at the beginning of May. So we might start seeing real people again. I mean, you guys have probably been totally isolated, not seeing anybody, but maybe Zoom calls and those things. I don't know if everybody's experienced these things, and maybe you can go into, the biggest one I get is obviously deals with the Florida Building Code and the change of use. And, you know, to simplify the process, and it's something to think about, you know, towards the future as you guys begin to put this together. The cigar and the haberdashery thing he was talking about is a good example. To just have a category for retail or restaurant or, you know, a service-orientated type business, whether it be auto mechanics or oil changes or whatever, so that it limits the change of use to a thing. And you can chime in any time, because I know we can't mess with the building code itself, but so people understand, if you have a retail store and you want to put a doctor's office in that same space that's been vacated by the retail store, you got to go through a change of use. And it's hard for me to comprehend. It takes them 4 to 6 months to do that process. So maybe you can just explain a little bit about that.
Yes.
And I have a couple other questions after that. But that's the biggest complaint I get.
That's a really difficult one to understand. A change of use, and Linda will fill in where I mess up. Change of use has been around forever, right?
It has been in the Florida Building Code since 2002.
Since 2002. Turn your mic on, Linda. It's on.
It's been in the Florida Building Code since 2002.
Linda, what year did you get here?
To the city of Homestead?
To the city of Homestead.
2015.
The city was effectively not implementing the change of use between 2002 and 2015. It was discretionarily going through the change of use process. So you will hear developers come in and say, well, this is new. It's not new. It's been around for 20 years. It just wasn't being applied all the time in Homestead, or it was being applied haphazardly by the previous building official. Now, the change of use is not a planning, so the terms mess us up, because it's not a use like we're seeing haberdasher versus milliner. It's a fire department use. It's an occupancy use. So it really has nothing to do with planning and everything to do with the building. It's the difference between a place of assembly and an office. So the Pastor Greathouse, so we're dealing with that. That was the thing where it gets complicated. You take the office space, same amount of space as this room, and it's designated as an office. Well, an office has an occupancy. There's probably something on this wall somewhere that says the occupancy of the room, right? It's somewhere in here. The fire code mandated. And so if this room were an office space, the fire department would say, okay, you're allowed 20 people in here, right? So that means the primary reason for that is there's enough place to get out if it burns down. But they also need crazy things like water fountains and mop sinks and stuff like that that's less life safety. But when you go to a place of assembly and then you convert this space into, instead of 50 people, same square footage, 250 people, then They really want to make sure that if the worst happened, 250 people could get out of this thing at the same time. That's why there's 1, 2, 3, 4 doors in this room, and my office over here has 2 doors, one in the front, one in the back, right? Because so the fire department makes us go through this and has the whole set of regulations that are building code in this set of books here that have nothing to do with these set of. So when the guy, when he changes from haberdasher to milliner, oh yeah, it's the same use. It's in the same thing in code. It's a totally different. That's why I think what we have to do is I want to do a video of this, right? We're going to write a script and explain in plain language what this change of use is. And in 5 minutes. And so put it on the web so that people can see this explanation, because it's each and every one of us have talked about this, and we still stumble over it time and time and time again, even myself. And I've been doing this for a long time. So once we script it, put it out there, we'll be able to streamline that a little bit. But it's not a planning issue. That's the complicated part of it.
Right, and that's the biggest thing. I mean, when somebody calls me up and says, why are they requiring me to put a water fountain in? Well, the city is not. Some other agency is, and we have to enforce those regulations. The same thing with the mop sink, you know.
And Linda, those are specified in your regulations. It says,
Absolutely.
put the water fountain in.
There is a table that provides the number of plumbing fixtures you're required if you have a church.
Right.
If you have, and I think one of the greatest challenges we have is that we have a lot of small businesses that lease spaces, and they need to get off the ground running to start making revenue, to pay their lease payments, to pay their employees, to pay their expenses to keep that business open. And they're not anticipating any costs. Unfortunately, when they come to us and we go through these texts and we find out there is a cost, and maybe it's just a mop sink. You have to have a service sink. It's a health safety issue. I can't have a facility that the janitor or the owner is mopping the floor at night and cleaning the sink, cleaning the mop in the same sink that everybody's washing their hands in the restroom. It's a health risk. So the code requires a mop sink, a service sink. That expense to some people is enormous, because that means, you know, that much less revenue that they have to pay their lease payment or whatever expenses they have for their business. So we try to help them as much as we can within the confines of the code. Now, unfortunately, we have a lot of people that come in and they say they don't want to do any work. The code forces some work, and that's challenging for them. They try to do it as best they can without hiring an architect, hiring an engineer, hiring a contractor, having a plumber come out and give you a price to install a service sink, and it's $500, $1,000, $1,500. That's a lot. So we do as best we can to get them through this with the least cost and the least time.
Sure, and I get that. And, you know, the experiences that I have had working, you know, with you and David and Michelle, you guys are extremely accessible to the public. I mean, you've told me, Larry, give them my cell phone number. Have them call me directly, and we will help them get through the process. So I think Councilman Fletcher said it a minute ago, and I think maybe as we go through this discussion tonight, I wouldn't be opposed to having more, and I wouldn't call them council meetings, but workshops to sit with city staff and the development services as we hone into some of the quick fixes that we might be able to do. You know, changing code, working on code, that book is huge. You know, there's a lot of stuff and there's a lot of detail. But I think if we can start to knock out some of the things that will make it a little bit faster to process. I mean, Joe, you pointed out a lot of good things tonight, which I wasn't, you know, wow, you can do this, you can do this. If we can't deny it, why are we making them go through this whole process? We may put Mr. Compton out of a job back there by getting rid of planning and zoning, but if that helps to speed up the process and make it easier on our end, not that we can control building and fire in Miami-Dade County, I think that will be very, very helpful. And I'd make myself available for whenever we can schedule those types of workshops for that. I have other things, but I think you're already undermanned and understaffed, so I'm not going to task you with any other assignments tonight.
Thank you.
But I'm very impressed with what I've seen tonight as far as your planning and you're preparing for this.
Thank you.
And I think some of the suggestions that you have brought to us, although it was a very quick presentations, the ones that sunk into me, I think are relatively quick fixes, and we can address some of those pretty quickly in workshops and bring them back to council to ratify those things. So thank you for your hard work.
Thank you.
All of you guys, David, Michelle, Linda, for everything you guys have done for us and you're going to continue to do for us in the future. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilman Ross. Councilman Shelley?
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is probably the, I don't know, fourth, fifth, sixth time I've sat through a very similar discussion and a very similar presentation by staff since I've been here for almost 12 years now. And we always kind of end up in the same scenario, which is there's typically complaints, there's typically community concerns, there's typically meetings. We've had multiple meetings. I know this staff and staff prior to you and council members prior to us have had similar meetings with the community, have heard similar concerns. We've had similar presentations, and we always have kind of a similar direction, and that is, go forth and fix it. And then ultimately, we as a body don't put in the work or aren't willing to follow it through to accomplish the goal, which is kind of what Councilman Roth is mentioning, and whether we have standing workshops where we, take a bite of this elephant one at a time, and each week, each month, whatever happens to be, we start to chip away at some of these issues and make some of these policy decisions, because ultimately, our staff is the ones that's getting yelled at. They're the ones that are taking the heat. People are coming in and blaming them, but as you heard, it's not really their fault. I mean, they're enforcing the rules, and I think that we've all come in and asked for our staff to be rule followers. We no longer want, just because that person to have an exception to the rule, you want the rules to be applied equally across everybody that comes through the process, and I think that's a policy we've all dictated, and staff is following that policy, and ultimately, they end up getting the heat for it. So I think, it's on us to ultimately, as policymakers, determine how we want to make those changes and what directions we want to give to staff. And I think, we can solve those problems. Now, I also say that, just in general policy making, some of the recommendations, we have to be careful of giving too much of our policy making ability to staff, because ultimately that's on us from the residents, and there are things that maybe could be done at the staffing level, but at the same time, they're not the ones that are going to get the calls and the complaints when someone doesn't like the way the site plan looks, or something that maybe we've allowed them to say meets all the basic requirements, but there was a reason why we as policymakers probably wanted to intervene and make some of those changes. So there's a balance there, and we have to figure out what that balance ultimately is and how much of our power we want to give to staff. But I think that's through that workshop process, and each thing, as we discuss it, will ultimately start to solve those problems. And I do somewhat agree, though I know it's the most expensive way as far as the overall revision, because as we as policymakers make the overall big ticket decisions, it makes us would make me more comfortable than giving some of that power back to staff, because I've already made that policy, or we as a body has already made those major policy decisions, so that we know that the city is moving in the direction that we want it to go. So although it is the most expensive process overall, it also does resolve some of the other processes and procedures that follow thereafter. So those are just kind of my thoughts from my experience for being up here. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Shelley. Councilwoman Avila?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank Development Services for putting together this presentation. It was very thorough. I have received plenty of complaints, as many of us have, with the process of filing applications, with asking for variances. Administrative variances take just as long, and that doesn't even require a hearing. But I think that by reducing the amount of requirements and regulations and the code that has to be followed, that will help add to the customer service aspect that our residents do deserve. Your expertise shows tonight.
Thank you.
And I think we do have to trust our experts, and we have to trust the recommendations that are being given to us. And I agree we have to fix the antiquated aspects of our code, the language. That's an easy fix that we can take on right away. Implementing the recommended procedural changes as well. I would never get rid of P&Z, but maybe redefine its purpose, redefine how we use it, make it an optional part of the process that makes applicants look better for electing to go through a P&Z recommendation. But eliminating the extensive parts of our process will ultimately reduce the time that it takes to get something approved. And as the examples were given tonight, there's so many hard costs involved with getting to the final product of an application. The least we can do is try to ease up the time, the energy, the expense that it takes to get through an application. Now, although we might be on par with other municipalities around, I don't think that's still acceptable. I think we can be a better example for other municipalities. The essence and the vision of our city with revising our code absolutely has to be done. Absolutely. We have to join together and get that done. I am willing to follow it through and sit through those workshops. I think we do need to laser focus on a few key items, and I've added it to my agenda tonight to discuss our downtown district. I think we can accelerate our review on that specifically. It's so important. It's what is going to add to our success as a city, for our businesses within our community, and especially now coming out of COVID for our economic viability. So we're understaffed, we're overregulated, development service is underappreciated, yet it's one of the most important departments that we have. So I appreciate the time tonight to focus on this. It's definitely one of my priorities, and I'm definitely in favor of simplifying our code and our procedures. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Yes, Councilwoman Bailey.
Thank you, Mayor. When I first saw this item, I thought, here comes a very long, boring workshop, and I could not be any happier or excited for it. In 2012, I opened a school right down the street here. I had to go through a change of use, and that has been, I mean, when I tell you it was a nightmare, it was a nightmare. And it wasn't the city of Homestead, it was more the county coming in. The fire department, different inspectors telling me completely different things. And I had 10 years in architecture. So I know you guys get the brunt of so much that doesn't even have to do with you. Anytime I reach out, you know, I've got a soft spot for it. Somebody's going through a 40-year recertification in the Southwest. You guys are always so available and willing to help. I appreciate that so much.
Thank you.
I think that having a more organized section of our website would be great. Maybe some type of inside homestead planning and zoning where we can talk about those things. I recently had a friend try to start a business. It wasn't a typical use, and it was incredibly frustrating. It ended up at the end, she didn't even need a change of use, but she didn't understand the process, and yeah, she went a few blocks down and had no issues. So to be able to look at those things and make it more user-friendly, I know that you guys have just as much frustration as a lot of our residents. And for me, the biggest thing are the mom and pop places that cannot afford those lawyers. That's what I would like to see more in Homestead. I think that's what a lot of us would like to see. So sign me up. I would love to sit through whatever we need to and get it done once and for all. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
And thank you, Development Services.
Vice Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Joe, and your team for your due diligence with the presentation. It appears as if it took a lot of sweat equity to put that together, so thank you for your time. And thank you for sharing the qualifications of your staff. I don't think there is any refuting that the intellect is there, the work ethic is there. So we know we're working with a top shelf planning and building department. I'm with Councilman Shelley. We've kind of been down this road before. We've heard a lot of this before, but it appears as if everything just comes to a halt and there's really not any follow through. So although I agree with most of my colleagues relative to really addressing the code and making a commitment toward addressing the code. I'm still having a hard time reconciling why we're not prioritizing digitizing the planning process. We have a 22nd century library, but yet we're still utilizing a whiteboard in the planning department. That it just makes no sense, and I don't understand why you guys haven't been kicking and screaming down there to get some technology to help digitize this process. I understand it's over $1 million to be able to bring us up to speed as it relates to technology, but this is imperative. As Councilwoman Avila stated, we need this for the economic vitality of our community and our business department. So as a body, we need to decide whether or not we're going to move forward. We need to make a decision. And I support this process with digitizing it because it's ridiculous that we're still utilizing a whiteboard in order to get these applications through. So workshops about the code, but what are we going to do about helping these businesses to determine where they are in the planning process, as opposed to calling, waiting to get a call back, waiting for feedback from staff? They should be able to go online, pull up with all of their identifiers and determine where they are in the planning process, as opposed to waiting, which is synonymous to like snail mail. So what are your thoughts on having some conversations about digitizing this process? Because it is completely archaic, and we can address the code, but if we don't move forward with this process, we're not going to get any further.
Is that for me?
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, sir. We
You can address.
Yeah, okay, I'll do that. We've identified this problem many years ago. We've had it in the capital improvements plan for a long, long time. You know, our attitude has been, being said, it's there, is we understand what the city of Homestead goes through every year relative to putting together a budget. Our attitude has been we will do what we can with what we have where we are, and we think we've been able to hold our own in doing that. And I know that there are probably greater needs in other places, that being the police force or some other departments, and so we'll continue to do what we need to do, and we'll do it quite well. But that being said, we would love the technology, and we'd love to talk to you and explain to you exactly what it would do, how much it would cost, and what the benefits of it would be. I think we have all that information because we've received the proposals from folks. So we're available at any time to go over that with you.
Honestly, if I can just follow up, yes, there are a lot of needs, you know, in many of our departments, but truthfully, your department take a lot of hits from those that want to do business with the city of Homestead. So we really need to move on being responsive to the needs of our business community. So your department can't take the back seat and say, oh, there's a need elsewhere. You have needs that need to be addressed so that you can stop taking hits and so that we can stop. And one of the suggestions that I would like to proffer to make it more business friendly, because there is an appearance that we're not business friendly, we're not foreign to that concept. I know I've seen with the school district, what they've done is how to do business with Miami-Dade County Public Schools. And they have these trainings, and they're very proactive, and all these who want to do business with the school district, they attend these meetings to get the information, to have an understanding of what the process looks like, how long it would entail, and I believe has taken a lot of, you know, the dark cloud from hovering over the county as it relates to how to do business with the school district. So maybe that's something that your department may want to host, how to do business with the city of Homestead, so that we can remove this appearance of us not being business friendly. And I think that's a quick fix, low-hanging fruit, and something that we can do proactively to get the business community to understand how they can effectively and efficiently do business with the city of Homestead. Just a thought.
I completely agree with you. That's something we would enjoy doing. In fact, when we've reached out through the Chamber of Commerce before, we've gone to some of their breakfasts, Linda and I, and done presentations and explained to them our process, and we're able to take questions. And, you know, I think we were able to get pretty decent reviews having done that. And I wish we could do more of it, because I will, I don't guarantee things very often, but I will this time. If you, I'll give my cell phone number to anybody, and I'll answer the phone at any time, and so will Linda. And so if I want people to know that if they have any type of question at all, it doesn't matter how silly it is, just reach out. We'll get you, I'll handhold you through the system. We can do that. We can do that with the staff we have now. It's a pain, but we can get it done. We'll walk everybody through the system. I mean, when they sit at home and stew because they don't know where to go, that's where we get the problems. But my phone's out there. 305-606-2364 is my cell phone number. I'm Joe Cordino, the Director of Development Services. If anybody on television is watching, and you feel free to call me, and if you want, test me, right? I'll test me. I'll pick up the phone almost all the time.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you,
Cordino.
Joe, for that. Yes, you are accessible. We've established that you are accessible, but I would like for us to be proactive. It's great that you have presentations with the chamber. It's great to piggyback, but I think it needs to be your show. It needs to be the City of Homestead show, how to do business with the city. It needs to be standalone as a proactive measure as opposed to piggybacking. Thank you for giving your phone number out. We know you're accessible, but we need to do a little bit more to get out there in front of this, ahead of this. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilman Roth.
Thank you, Mayor. Just two things. When I first got on council, I met with Joe. We were at the Portofino City Hall over there, and that's all you told me about. We're getting this new program.
Yeah.
I spoke to the vendors on the phone. We're getting this new program. It's going to be implemented. It's going to take us a year to 18 months to get it going. It's almost 6 years later.
We have one small problem.
Yeah, no money.
Correct.
So Kate or Jerry, I'm assuming when you speak to these vendors, there must be some way to arrange some type of financing plan where we don't have to put the cost all up front. You guys can work those details out, but I think the consensus at this point is let's find a solution to the technology aspect of the City of Homestead Development Services. I think the Vice Mayor said it pretty good. We got a 21st century library, and we've got a mid-50s system of doing development services. So, and the other thing, if we can, by the time the CAL meeting starts, put together a schedule of when these workshops can be held. We don't necessarily have to have quorum for this, but members can visit with, they can go through Zoom and be a part of those meetings as well. It wouldn't be anything making, I don't think, policy that would come back to a quorum type medium like this. But let's get those on the table now. Let's start planning it. If it has to be twice a month, I'm okay with that. I don't want to wait a month and a month and a month. I think if we can do them twice a month, that would be great. We'll start hammering this thing out, as Councilman Shelley said, piece by piece, take one bite at a time and figure this thing out. But I think if we can get back here by Cal with some type of a schedule laid out, we can figure that part out too. That's all. Thank you, Mayor.
Hey, Councilman Roth. Madam Manager, before you jump in, I'll go ahead and say it. Many of us, I believe, have some meetings set up with staff about this American Rescue Plan allocation that's coming to the City of Homestead. While we don't have guidance for it yet, clearly one of the overriding principles is economic recovery. But in addition to that slug of money that over the next year and a half will be coming to the city, under that plan, there are billions of dollars in grants available to cities for a whole host of other issues. And I would propose that, either, probably from both sides, whether it be both grant and the American Rescue Plan money, that clearly the cost of software and the wholesale revision of our code falls under economic recovery and development. Because, you know, kind of getting ahead of ourselves here, my philosophy is that this money is not for a short-term fix. This is to lay the groundwork to position our city and those who come behind us to thrive 10, 15, 20 years from now. You know, to borrow the phrase from the president, this is perhaps our once-in-a-generation opportunity. Just as prior councils looked at the aid that came to Homestead after Hurricane Andrew, let's hope we can learn from their mistakes and learn from their good ideas and go forward and find a way to do the things that we haven't done, in large part due to financial issues, and find a way to pigeonhole some of these activities under the heading of economic development. And I agree. If I need to be in this building twice a week with you all to catch up for the last year where we couldn't be together, and quite frankly, there's nothing like the personal interaction and the body language and the back and forth. I don't think this kind of discussion is a discussion that could or should happen remotely. And I'm all for that, 4, 5, 6 times a month. If we all need to be here to lay this groundwork, so be it. Sorry, staff, but so be it. And you're right, Councilman, if it's a workshop, we don't need a quorum. Clearly, minutes are going to be available. But I guess to the point, and hopefully this meshes with my colleagues, is I guess for our first meeting or the next presentation, we would look to our staff and Mr. Cordino in particular, okay, what can we do the fastest, cheapest, and easiest to make the process start to become easier and cheaper for applicants? And from where I sit, it's more important to address commercial development and the commercial side of the code than it is to address, for now, the residential side of the code. I think clearly that mandate and the philosophy now is economic recovery and opportunity. The housing market's going to do its own thing, and I think maybe they'll get a byproduct of some of this, but I would like us to be focused on the commercial side of these processes to the extent that that's applicable. Councilman Fletcher, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, just one final thing. I don't want anybody to mistake my discussion points earlier. I think the city staff has done an outstanding job, supporting this effort, but I remember 20 years ago when I sat on city council, we had very similar discussions about changing the city code. Councilman Shelley said, 12 years ago he started it. We just need to take the bullet and jump off the ledge and let's fix it. Let's make it happen. I think it handcuffs you in some cases to get things done. So I just want to ensure that, I'm not upset at you guys. I think you do a great job with what you have.
Thank you.
But you need to be stingy too. You need to ask for what you want to make your department better. And then it's going to be up to us to make that decision ultimately. But you need to keep asking for it and keep asking for it. It's all part of a capital improvement plan to make the city better. Be stingy. That's all I'm saying. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman.
Thank you, Mayor. Just another final thought. Absolutely, I agree 100% with Vice Mayor and her comments. And in my mind, when I was discussing the revision for the essence and future vision of our code, it absolutely included digitizing. I would never invest in fixing our code and not digitize it at the same time and standardize that process. And ultimately, that responsibility to get to the end of it all, it falls on us, not on staff. We are the policymakers. I'm here for the long haul. Let's set up that appointment next week if we can. And we do need to have an education campaign for our residents, for our small business community on how to do business with us. And back to my comment about redefining how P&Z helps the city, perhaps that would be one of the things they can be tasked with, helping with the educational campaign process for our business partners. And being an advisory board and giving guidance, and also offering suggestions for when that time comes to evaluate the building code. We get the option to comment on building code revisions, but I don't see us ever making those suggestions on the dais and giving direction to Development Services to speak on behalf of the City of Homestead for things we want to change within the Florida Building Code. So we do need to have a committee or somebody that's making sure that's at the forefront of their priorities, so that we don't get left out when it comes to making important changes that will affect us tremendously in the future. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So I guess with that, I would look to Mr. Cordino, the manager, and say, are our directions as clear as mud now and we're ready to go forward?
No, actually, Mayor, and I'd like to preface my comments by thanking the mayor and council for listening and for understanding, because I just have so much pride in the work that this department does. So I'm just glad that it came to the surface today, because I know there are sometimes complaints and we need some improvements, but it is a top-notch group and we're going to continue to do a great job. And I'd just like to summarize the direction that we're hearing and tell you what to expect. So we are going to prioritize the quick fix list and come back to you. We'd like to be back to you by the cow with a schedule of workshops. We understand that we're willing to meet, even without a quorum, more than once or twice or three. I think the mayor said 17 times a month or something like that. So we will absolutely accommodate that. We will be asking you, we talked among staff about the frequently asked questions, that we really would like you to help us be the spokesperson when we do Inside Homestead. Here's what change of use looks like. And whether it's the mayor or Councilman Fletcher or whomever, we'd like to be able to bring you into that and help us educate the public. One person's shaking his head. Thank you. Thank you. The vice mayor's suggestion, our own show, like we can definitely make this our own show, not just going to other meetings, but we can make it our own show, and we are happy to do that. We actually look forward to doing that, to just being able to communicate and educate people. We will absolutely follow up on digitizing, like the mayor's suggestions, with suggestions for type methods. Maybe we could fund some things, and also Councilman Roth's suggestion that it doesn't have to be an upfront payment. So we will follow up on that. One question that I do have, I mean, these are things that we'll do right away and get started right away. We will continue to actively pursue grants, you know that, on all levels. But I don't know if the direction of the council, as Councilman Fletcher and I think perhaps someone else suggested, do you want us to put together an RFP for a complete overhaul or begin to work on that as well?
Yeah, so that's an idea of mine. I don't want you to spend tons of time on it, but I think we've already done it to some extent at some point in the past. I think we just need to dust it off, you know, and see what those true costs are, you know, because if you don't know what the costs are, you can't take a bite of the apple yet. So that's
Agreed, Councilman. Like I said prior, the cost estimates we have are about a year old, so they're a little bit stale. But with that being said, staff convened, we had a meeting, and what we decided is to actually go out to different sites right now. We're trying to find the right glass slipper for the software that we're looking for us, because we can go to the RFP, and these things are like this. And then you're paging through this and trying to find the perfect fit for our department, what they're looking for. So we kind of changed our strategy. I'm not saying we won't do an RFP again, but right now we're just going to be visiting different sites to see if we can find that right software, that perfect fit for us, and determining what that software is, then come back, you know, depending on the cost, whether we're refinancing or we're still looking. But we'll keep you all updated as well.
And just one quick thing, you know, if we're going to do some of these things on our own through workshops, you know, that's going to lower the cost in the long term of fixing the code. So, you know, if we're going to fast track some of these items, you know, we're taking a bite of that apple out already. And so it just gives us a little less to do in the future. So if we're able to move forward, you know, on our own with some of these items, we're going to be able to reduce those costs. So thank you.
Thank you. And one of the leading things, at least in the code, is taking the hardship provision out. Again, that's another piece of that antiquated part. That's where it falls on our discretion, takes the heat off of you, and we go forward. Next items. Number 8, tab 14, car number 3152, LOSNER Park Amendment Number 1. Is that you, Madam Manager?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is with regard to the LOSNER Park project. I know that you know originally this contemplated fountains as well as a restaurant, and those are not happening right now. So we have asked the designer to design what it will look like during the time we don't have those amenities. And we do hope that in the future, we'll be able to bring those amenities to the park, but just not at this time. So it's a redesign and update the permit to reduce the park construction cost by deferring construction of the restaurant and show fountain. The overall cost goes from about $10 million to $5.5 million. Design aesthetically appropriate components to be constructed now that can be cost effectively converted in the future in the event there is a restaurant or fountain in the future. And also it includes the design for the electrical and structural components to incorporate the new shade canopy that the council directed that we include in the park. Staff recommends that Mayor and Council approve the attached resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an amended agreement with Sasaki Associates, Inc. This amendment will cover the design and permitting for the reduction to the park project scope and construction costs. These changes require revisions to the documents that extend to all design consultants and coordination with the city, contractor and subcontractor. These additional services, as outlined in the amendment, is on a fixed fee basis of $128,000. While this covers the cost of the design, we will have to come back to you with costs for implementation of some of these design requests. And it is funded by park impact fees.
Thank you. Any questions from council? A question. And I understand there's electrical and underground plumbing involved too, and different lighting situations, but is it really necessary to buy landscaping on a temporary or something that we all hope will be in an area that will be built upon in a few years? You know, it's like $33,000 in this contract for a revised landscape design for a relatively small footprint within the park.
Julio will respond to that, Mayor.
Thank you.
Mayor, in reference to the landscape revisions, basically what you have is when we remove these amenities, which is the fountain and the restaurant, there is basically a blank real estate left open that what we're trying to do is mimic what's being done in the area around it so that when people go there, they basically don't realize that a restaurant has been removed or a fountain has been removed. The idea is to blend it with everything that's going on around it. And, you know, in essence, just the fact that we lowered the price by $5 million, you know, these $33,000 that we're talking about here for landscape, it's a way to make sure that you can't tell that something is missing, right? That it's part of the design, the benches. When we talk landscape, it's not just trees, it's also, you know, hardscape that includes, you know, pavers, benches, planting areas. So it's something that if you left it out, it would definitely look like something is missing and the park is not complete. And that's what we're trying to get at, to make sure that it's complete.
We're talking $33,500 to design that and plan it, not buy the trees, the bushes, the pavers, and the benches. That's going to be an additional cost.
Correct. You're absolutely right. This is just part of, you know, it's part of the cost of whenever you build something, you got to go through the design process of it, and then there is going to be costs associated with the construction of whatever is put there. But again, the whole idea is to make sure that it's seamless and you don't notice a difference.
Thank you. Anything further from council? Any other questions, comments? All right. Is there anyone online or in the audience wishing to speak on this?
None online.
All right, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion for approval.
Mr. Mayor.
Moved by Councilman Roth, seconded by Councilman Shelley.
Mr. Mayor.
Pardon?
I apologize.
Sure.
May I read this
yes,
into
you got to
record?
read the title.
Yes, thank you, sir. This is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Homestead, Florida, authorizing the city manager to enter into a revised agreement with Sasaki Associates, Inc. for the provision of landscape architecture services for the expansion of LOSNER Park, providing for implementation and providing for an effective date.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. We closed the public hearing and read by title. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Councilwoman Bailey?
Yes.
Councilwoman Avila?
Yes.
Councilman Shelley?
Yes.
Councilman Roth?
Yes.
Councilman Fletcher?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Fairclough Staggers?
Yes.
Mayor Losner?
Disgruntled, yes.
Motion carries.
Florida Department of Corrections Trustee Squad Services. Mr. Pearl, want to read the resolution, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. This is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Homestead, Florida, approving work squad agreement between the City of Homestead and the Florida Department of Corrections, providing inmate work squads to assist City Parks and Recreation Department, providing for implementation, authorizing renewal, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The State of Florida Department of Corrections Homestead Correctional Institution is offering to provide the City of Homestead with up to 5 inmates to assist the Parks and Recreation Department under the supervision of the city's trustee service specialists, and they assist Parks and Recreation with various tasks throughout the city. Staff recommends that the Mayor and Council approve the attached resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an interagency agreement with the State of Florida Department of Corrections for the use of up to 5 inmates by the Parks and Recreation Department for a grand total of $344,982 over 3 years. This is a 3-year agreement with the option to renew for one additional 3-year period upon the same terms, conditions, and mutual written consent of both parties. And this is the same agreement that we have presently with the Department of Corrections. However, that agreement expires in August of this year.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Any questions or comments from council? Councilman Roth.
Thank you, Mayor. I know we didn't have them during the COVID crisis. Did we pay for those services, and would we get a credit for those?
No, it's a great question, and actually, when we don't have them, we do not pay for it. And we don't have them now, and we won't have them probably until July 1st, and we will not be paying for it.
Okay, and that's the way the contract's written. If
Yes.
they're not on site, we don't pay.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman. And as the manager stated with me in a conversation, and I see it, we really notice when we don't have them. You really don't realize how effective and how complimentary they are to our staff. And without them, what would we have to spend to keep up with all of that? Councilman Shelley? Questions? Yes, you're good? Okay. So we have a motion for approval?
Of it.
Moved by Councilwoman Avila. Second by Councilman Fletcher. Roll call.
Councilman Shelley?
Yes.
Councilwoman Bailey?
Yes.
Councilwoman Avila?
Yes.
Councilman Fletcher?
Yes.
Councilman Roth?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Fairclough Staggers?
Yes.
Mayor Losner?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Agenda item number 9, public comments. I'll now open the floor for public comments. Each individual will have 3 minutes to speak. Please come to the podium when your name is called and give us your name and address for the record. Do we have anyone who has pre-registered to speak in person?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Anyone online?
No, Mr. Mayor.
All right. No one in the audience wishing to speak on any general matter rather than a specific matter we've already heard. Okay. Business from the city manager.
No, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
No, thank you. Mr. Attorney? Thank you, too. All right. Business reports of mayor. Reports of mayor and council. Councilman Roth, you're first on the list tonight.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Just 2 things. The CRB, the Community Relations Board, is offering out their spring essay contest. You can call for more information, 305-224-4433.
Again, the Community Relations Board is having their spring essay contest. You can call 305-224-4433 or just call the City of Homestead and they will route you to the proper person to speak to. There are 3 first-place prizes. Age categories or school categories are elementary, middle, and high school. And it's a 500-word essay. And the topic of the essay will be, what are your post-COVID dreams? Winners in each of the categories will receive a prize valued up to $500. Again, that's sponsored by the City of Homestead, Florida City Community Relations Board. And another event this weekend, this is something I do the last Saturday of each month. That date is subject to change. However, this month it hasn't changed, so it is the last Saturday of the month. And again, our City of Homestead, Florida City Community Relations Board is participating in a community cleanup day. Again, this is something that I participate in every month, and we pick up trash in the villages of Homestead. It takes about 1 hour. Anyone who's interested in going out and volunteering to pick up trash and litter in the villages of Homestead, you can show up at the Audubon Clubhouse in the parking lot, 10 a.m. We're usually done by 11. We provide the trash bags, the gloves, and the picker-uppers. And if any other community or organization would like me, and I'm not going to invite these folks, because I can't make them go out and do it, but I'm happy to go out and help you pick up litter and clean up your communities as well. I won't come out there and do it all by myself, but if you organize a group, I'll be happy to participate and bring the necessary supplies to help gather the trash. Yes, I will make that commitment. So, and that's all I got, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Roth. Appreciate it. All right, who's next? Councilman Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, fellow council members. I want to first thank the manager and staff for addressing several landscaping issues throughout the city. We had some overgrown trees on some city property that had been neglected for quite some time. We were able to identify, I guess the contract, specified that, but it was kind of overlooked. So we were able to get those cleaned up, and I'm telling you, it looks 1,000% better. If we're setting the standards for landscape rotation and clean looks, the rest of the citizens will maybe step in line and help out in their own as well. I want to applaud Mr. Roth there for reaching out his helping hand to go out and assist with picking up of trash and garbage. We've had some discussions again with the city manager regarding some of the medians, the new medians along Lucy Street and Campbell Drive, that if you go to the intersections and you look down, there's a lot of garbage sitting there. Those are the areas where people walk through. So, I would offer my assistance as well if we can get a group of people together to go out and address those areas, with the proper safety measures, because there is traffic on those roadways. We need to get out there and help make our city beautiful. That's another area I'm more than welcome to and willing to assist the rest of the council if they choose to do so, and city staff as well. Lastly, I want to talk about an email that we all got from the manager today in regards to Palm Drive between 16th Avenue and 12th Avenue. Completely repaved, a month or so ahead of original schedule. It's a great road, but I want to keep the pedal down, and now we need to push them for 16th or from 18th Avenue to 28th Avenue there as well. So if we get that done, that whole section right there in the city will be in a very great shape. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Fletcher. Councilwoman Bailey?
Thank you, Mayor. First, I would like to thank everyone that participated in our April 5th Walking One Stop. I thought it was a very big success, Mr. Wayne Rollins is the coordinator. I really enjoyed it so much that I reached out to him to see if we could start scheduling mini walking one-stops and just focusing on different resources, different departments, different neighborhoods, and just going door to door, talking to our residents and offering all different resources. I would love to follow each of these little walking one-stops with a little event. So for example, in June, we're gonna be focusing on summer job opportunities and youth programs, and then we would have a little follow-up event where some of these different resources could come out, talk to the kids about the different opportunities that we have available. So I'm very excited about that, and I will definitely share all of the upcoming ones. Speaking of all this trash pickup, I recently was part of some Zoom thing that was all about this program called Literati. And right before the pandemic, I don't know if anyone remembers, I had a bunch of kids up here pledging to do a certain amount of cleanups using this app. And it is such a great tool to be able to really pinpoint where our problem areas are and what the type of litter is that we see the most. So I was really excited to hear that they're doing a lot more working with cities. So different departments, they offer all different tools. So I'm getting in contact with a couple people there, and I'd like to bring that forth. I think that it would help get the community involved. You could have been very impressive, Mr. Roth, with showing how much you've picked up in your last years. So I will bring that back as well. And lastly, do not forget about Maui murals. They will be back before you at the next cow. There were a couple pieces that we wanted to work on dive a little deeper into. So that is all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Appreciate it. Councilman Shelley?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just one quick item. That's just kind of to update everybody on the Dark Sky Week. It went very well. I wanted to thank everybody for making the contributions to the trolleys. We were able to put 4 in service that night. It was probably one of the biggest turnouts the National Park Service has had for one of their events. Everybody was very excited, very happy to be out there. So I want to thank all of you guys for investing in that for our community. And then also, as the library has also done a virtual reality dark sky. They have 3 different programs there as well, as a means of trying to get people related to the dark skies, the national parks, and the library itself. And that's also been very successful. So just wanted to update everybody and thank everybody for your support.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Avila?
Thank you, Mayor. Congrats to Councilwoman Bailey for her awesome event. Very inspiring. In fact, it's inspiring me to do some in my district too. So I look forward to bringing those to the table and announcing those. Congrats to Councilman Shelley for his Dark Sky event. I think that's a standard that most other leaders in our community can look to in bringing quality events for our residents. I have plenty of thank yous to share as well. I want to thank the Parks and Recs Department for helping us pull off an extensive overhaul of our baseball parks at J.D. Red Park. This is a problem that has been around for many, many, many years. Poor drainage occurring because the clay and the baseball fields would spill out during a rain into our drains, and it would flood the field, it would flood the dugouts, it would flood the paths and walking areas of the parks, good 15, 16 feet deep in. My husband hit his first home run at J.D. Red Park as a child, and he remembers the muddy dugouts. I mean, this is not a COVID problem. This was a budget and planning issue, and I want to thank Parks and Recs for working with nonprofit organizations in our community, specifically the Kiwanis Club of Homestead, who secured sponsors for the big park. But then I want to also publicly thank Councilwoman Bailey, who found our sponsors for the other 2 baseball fields. So we have effectively mitigated that problem for all 3 baseball fields at J.D. Red Park. Also, the scoreboard, the Jimmy Rice scoreboard in the Jimmy Rice Memorial, shamefully, it was very deteriorated, faded. The picture of Jimmy Rice was not there any longer, and they have repainted it and put in a new picture. So I'm very, very proud now of that J.D. Red Park and happy to have been part of that solution and that cleanup. I want to thank specifically Mia Devane from the mayor's office, the county mayor's office, and for our our Madam Manager, Kate McCaffrey, for seeking out a solution for the canal, the dirty canal that I mentioned at our last meeting. A lot of our residents in that area were complaining about that, and it got done. We brought it to the dais, and it's been cleaned, so thank you very much for that. Also, it's Month of the Military Child. I want to thank the city for turning the City Hall and our police department purple. It's not only going to be up for a day, it's going to be up and shining purple through the rest of the month. So I'm wearing purple today. Please wear purple throughout the community, especially since we are such a military community, in memory of our children who do sacrifice a lot when their parents go away on deployments. I want to thank also our Public Works for fixing the lights, the street lights that were out in front of Waterstone. This has been an ongoing issue, and it has been reported to have been repaired, so thank you very much for that. And I want to announce a food distribution happening in Malibu Bay. The clubhouse in Malibu Bay is open to the public, so it's the perfect place for us to host this drive-through food distribution. It's going to be next Tuesday, April 27th, and I'm looking forward to collaborating with our County Commissioner for District 8 to help bring some personal protection equipment for our families to receive there. And I'll be sharing about our vaccination sites and the way that vaccinations can be made for appointments to be vaccinated while we're having that event. I want to also report about the meeting of the leagues that I announced last month that I would be having. It was hosted last Wednesday. I had everyone representing the programs and the coaches within our Parks Department at that table, with the exception of one, which couldn't make it at that time, but I'll be following up with her later. A lot of insight, a lot of need is around our Parks and Recs Department. The JD Red drainage problem is just one example of a long, long time of deferment of maintenance and planning and proper budgeting. Let's just, let's face it, guys. We need to focus on policy, our parks, our police department. Those are the priorities, at least for me. So I look forward to meeting with City Manager's office to go over those issues within the bathroom facilities, the concession stands, simple things that we can address rather quickly. I also want to share that our County Commissioner has launched Safe Summers. I think it's important that I bring it up now because the grant application process for this effort is between now, April 21st to the 30th. So it's a very small window of time for nonprofit organizations to apply for grants. There's $200,000 for nonprofits to be able to put on programming, full-time, 5-day-a-week programming within our community, within District 8, for our children and families. So if any nonprofits out there, if you're interested in bringing a summer program, please look into Danielle Cohen-Higgins, Commissioner Danielle Cohen-Higgins' Safe Summers grant application process. And I want to announce that next month we will be having, or the Kiwanis of Homestead Club will be sponsoring, along with Rotary Club of Homestead and County Commissioner McGee, the first time ever at the historic Seminole Theater, the South Florida Youth Symphony. So it's very exciting, and I want to thank our nonprofit organizations for investing in such a beautiful and cultural experience for our youth to experience. It will be free and open to the public. I'm bringing this up here because I would like to know, and it's not a fee that we can waive or ask to be waived, but if any of our council members would like to participate in donating some funds towards the rental fee for the Youth Symphony, especially since it's the first time, it's $1,540 for this nonprofit organization to rent the Seminole Theater to put the show on. So I just invite you all to consider, and if you'd like to donate some funds from your budgets, please let our assistants know. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. No downtown discussion tonight?
Oh, thank you, Mayor. For the downtown discussion, I think that we went over a lot of the points that I wanted to bring up tonight. So I thank you for bringing the presentation to our agenda, and we'll just leave it on the table for those workshops. Thank you.
Very, very. Thank you. Appreciate it. Vice Mayor.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Councilwoman Avila, for mentioning Safe Summers. the grant application process for community-based organizations that provide summer programming for students. This is something very passionate for me. Each year, I work with Career Source South Florida to provide summer jobs for our youth to keep them engaged over the summer. So I'm happy that Commissioner Danielle Cohen-Higgins is committed to leading into this work as well. So thank you so much for mentioning that. And I also wanted to mention to you, Councilwoman Avila, that my daughter and I supported Purple Up for Military Kids Day. We had on our purple today. I was happy to see that Air Base K-8 Center went all out for Purple Up for Military Kids Day. And I would love to work with our schools to expand that to all of our schools within the city of Homestead to support Purple Up for Military Kids. We did it at my school today. I invited my staff and students to wear purple. So thank you for championing that initiative. We definitely support those military children who have to make so many sacrifices. So I really appreciate that. I also want to acknowledge some students and schools that participated in our virtual art competition. We had an amazing virtual gala last week that was very well attended from schools, by schools, and students throughout the community. And I would just like to acknowledge students who participated from the Center for International Education, Somerset Academy Charter School, Coral Reef Senior High School participated, School for Advanced Studies Homestead, Advanced Achievers Academy, Somerset Soho. It was well attended virtual art gala, and the winners for the competition in first place was Caden DiStefano. For second place was Jasmine Blaze, and third place was Amira Gordon. These are all local students participating in our school, from our schools. Caden attends Somerset Academy Charter School, Jasmine attends Center for International Education, and Amira Gordon attends School for Advanced Studies Homestead. So congratulations to those students and all those schools that participated. Very, very well attended, and I'm proud of the work of our youth council. Additionally, May is the month that is set aside for Teacher Appreciation Month, and each year the City of Homestead Education Committee hosts a Champion for Education gala. We've had standing room only events for the past couple of years, from the Homestead Minor Speedway to Seminole Theater to our lobby there in City Hall. It's a jam-packed event. Last year we couldn't have it because of COVID, but this year we're going to host a drive-by recognition for all of the Teachers of the Year, Rookie Teachers of the Year in the City of Homestead and Florida City. This will be in May. The first week in May is Teacher Appreciation Week, but it will be, I believe, the third week in May. It'll be a drive-by event for all of the local teachers in our area. And those are all of my announcements for this evening. And thank you, Mayor. I pivot back to you. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, I have one more. I want to announce that earlier, a couple months ago, we distributed brand new laptops for students in our community that were participating in My School Online. I'm proud to report that through a partnership with our friends at FPL, I have some gently used laptops and desktops to distribute to students in the community who still need their own personal device. So if there's a child in this community that needs a gently used or can use a gently used laptop or a desktop, to please email me at pfaircloth, F as in Frank, AIRCLOUGH, at cityofhomestead.com, and I will be distributing those on a first-come, first-served basis. So be sure to reach out to me if you can benefit from those devices. That's it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Madam Manager, before I go into my pre-printed agenda items, we have a vaccine availability tomorrow at Harris Field. Is that from 10 to 6? Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Tomorrow, Friday, and Saturday from 10 to 6. It's a walk-up, no appointments necessary, and we're just encouraging anyone who wants a vaccine. It's a Pfizer vaccine that they can go there.
And do they need some type of identification?
Yes, you need some type of identification, but it's not a very strict level of identification, so we're encouraging everyone to go with any sort of identification.
Very good. Again, that's for the next 3 days, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at Harris Field. Up to 400 Pfizer vaccines available. First come, first served basis. Walk up with whatever kind of identification you can produce.
Yes.
No appointment necessary. Okay, my first item tonight is car number 3144, and this is a resolution opposing several items of legislation that are pending in the House and or the Senate. All of them, in one way or another, in my view, as well as the view of the Florida League of Cities, and these were discussed at the Miami-Dade League of Cities as well, preempt or attempt to preempt or would preempt our rights as a city to govern our look and feel and activities. For example, let me go through them. Building design, residential building design would be precluded under House Bill 55 with very little exception. We've enacted some standards. I know we tailed off on discussions at the beginning of the pandemic, but this would effectively remove the ability from us to have our self-determination as to what our community might look like. Secondly, prohibiting us from regulating short-term rentals such as VRBO, Airbnb, no licensing, no inspection. It just happens in any neighborhood, and I guess typically, unless your HOA precludes it, you're likely to have a party house next door with no recourse by the city to regulate that. Next item was House Bill 403, precluding governments from prohibiting or licensing any home-based businesses that, in effect, if that home-based business is allowed in a zoning category and by definition in your city, it can happen out of a home. And again, for me, it's a matter of preemption and protection of neighborhoods. HB1, if it's still in your package, that's been enacted by the governor, so the resolution in our package should be an amended resolution. Is that correct? Yeah. Right, okay. So I'm asking us to have a conversation as to whether or not we would issue our resolution to be forwarded to the State House and Senate as applicable, and to our representatives in opposition of these items that erode our self-determination as a city government. So, council members, welcome your comments. Yeah. All right, do we have a motion? We need a motion? You got to read it first. Okay. Let's let Mr. Pearl read it by title.
Mr. Mayor, this is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Homestead, Florida, expressing opposition to various legislative bills before the Florida Senate and House of Representatives that would negatively impact the City of Homestead, Florida, providing for implementation and providing for an effective date.
Thank you. So, do we have a motion to approve? Moved by Councilman Roth. Second by Councilman Fletcher. Any further discussion, council, or public comment? Need a roll call vote, Madam Clerk.
Councilman Shelley,
Yes.
Councilwoman Bailey,
Yes.
Councilman Roth,
Yes.
Councilman Fletcher,
Yes.
Councilwoman Avila.
Yes, but I think we went over public comment quickly, and I'm aware of someone raised
Yes.
their hand, but yes.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, there's somebody online that would like to speak.
Okay. Well, let's stall the voting and hear from the, who is it?
Ram?
All right, very good. Welcome, Mr. Order, you're on.
Hey, Mayor. Sorry about that. I was actually trying to speak as a public comment, so this might be off topic. I raised my hand, but I mean, if they didn't see, that's fine. I was wondering if I can ask my public comment here.
If you'll hang on for just a second and let us finish the vote on this resolution, and we'll go back to public comment. So where were we?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That was a yes.
Thank you.
All
Vice
right,
Mayor
Councilwoman
Fair,
Av-
Vice Mayor Fairclough Staggers,
Yes.
Mayor Losner,
Yes.
the motion carries.
All right, so we're going to go back into the public comment session. Apparently, Mr. Orr did raise his hand, and we didn't catch it. So, Mr. Orr, you've got your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. And it's probably not his fault. My phone froze, but that's okay. Actually, I wanted to ask the council as a whole, or maybe one council member. I wanted to ask, did anyone? It's in regards to the HHA, if you don't mind. And I do know that the city of Homestead has no qualms and nothing to do with the HHA, but with all due respect, Mayor, you are the only one that can remove and appoint. My question is, it's been brought to my attention that board members or a board member has resigned from the HHA. Is that true?
Mr. Orr, let me perhaps answer your question in this manner. It's not under my business, but I was going to announce that there are 3 vacancies that currently exist on the Housing Authority Board, and I was going to ask the clerk to advertise those. One of those is for the resident position. The other is both terms have recently expired, and I've been advised that one member whose term has now expired moved away from the area. So I am going to announce those vacancies tonight.
Okay, perfect. So you confirmed it. That's it. Thank you so much, Mayor.
Thank you. All right, let me move on to tab 18, a building moratorium. And we were all here, and in the weeks leading up to the moratorium, we had some very early and just conceptual discussions about potentially enacting a residential building moratorium at some level. Clearly, it was not as to commercial in any way, shape, or form. We talked, in general, got some legal advice as to the basis for enacting that and what perhaps that would allow us to accomplish. And I think coincidentally, it ties in very well with the discussions we had tonight on code revisions, on providing public services, parks needs, etc. And I know that early on in the pandemic, I raised the issue, and there just didn't seem to be an interest or a willingness at that point to continue those discussions on a remote basis. And now that we all seem to pretty much be able to be here, and we're all committed to getting, at full throttle back to business in person, as to whether or not the council was amenable to, again, scheduling workshops with respect to that issue, not deciding tonight what density levels, what geographic areas. That would be a level of discussion for the workshops, but whether we would commit to go ahead and take part in those further discussions. As I recall, we had just gotten to the point where we were going to look at housing mix, which is something that was addressed tonight, and I think probably would have been implicit in your ongoing downtown vision, and I think are important as we approach build-out and redevelopment. Build-out on the east side, and I think significant redevelopment on the west side. I just, to borrow a phrase from Mr. Pearl, kind of take your temperature and see where we are on expending the time and effort to have some more of those conversations. So I'd welcome your comments and input. Councilwoman?
Thank you, Mayor. Although I can appreciate the intent of a moratorium on the east side, being in real estate, I know the impact of what the word moratorium has in general to the business community, to residential, and I don't think that it would have a positive impact in our process for economic recovery. And I think that through our educational campaigning and through the changes that we're going to do with building and development services, that we'll be able to incentivize the development in the direction we want it to go, rather than using the tool of a moratorium. So you'll have some convincing to do in my case.
Well,
Mayor. Just
it-
being honest, Mayor.
The thought is it would give us some breathing room to enact some of these things and take stock. And again, I think most of our comments tonight were earlier with Mr. Cordino were geared to commercial. The word moratorium here in this context is not intended to be commercial at all, but I appreciate your comments. Councilman Roth, I think you were next.
Well, you already know how I feel, but it's the word that bothers me, moratorium. The discussion that we had with development services, I think would lend very well to what I think your goal may be, and that would be density and things like that, and where we're going to be in the city and how we're going to put certain things. I just think the word is bad, so if you can just maybe come up with a different word, that would be great. But I'll be at every meeting.
All right, I'll find a thesaurus on. Hey, did I say it right? A thesaurus.
A thesaurus.
Yes.
Need a thesaurus.
And we'll come up with a different expression as long as we all understand what the
concept,
the real intent is there.
Yeah.
With the understanding that every day that goes by, there are potentially more applications filed that are likely to escape the dragnet of whatever that word is we're going to use.
Yeah, no, I get it. And I would think that most of those that may be in the process of coming down the pipeline, and Joe, you may have a say in this, would all of those would need some sort of council approval, site plan approval, density changes. I know we'll have one coming up probably next month which we've already talked about, the 20 acres there on North Canal and Farm Life. So just that word moratorium. I mean, because we need, controlled development, because if we stop the development and we can't control it, then we're going to lose some of the commercial aspects, I think, also of people wanting to come into the city. We've done great out there east. I mean, there's traffic, yeah, but it's nothing like going up the road. And I had a conversation today about somebody, and I think all of us sitting up here today and former councils really missed the boat with fighting the county with their development along the turnpike, what they're doing along US 1 corridor, because the bottom line is the city of Homestead and Florida City are at the bottom of the transportation grid when it comes to the turnpike. So no matter what happens, we're penalized not only with traffic heading north in the morning and traffic heading south in the evening, but we're also the most taxed using that expressway. So I'll leave it at that, because we can go on and on about those things, but the word moratorium is the one that bothers me the most. Thank you.
Councilwoman Bailey, before I turn to my left, anything to add?
We could call it the building STP, a short-term pause. No. I agree. We need to, there's a lot of things we look at. I understand the word moratorium having that negative effect, but hopefully if we can meet and come up with some quick solutions, maybe we don't have to announce that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Shelley?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think last discussion we had, I was on board with having further discussion. The question being what is left that we can stop, what is left in the pipeline. But those are all things that I think, as we continue down this path, we can get more information before we make a final decision. So I'm open to further discussion and proceeding where it goes.
Councilman Fletcher?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think we call it building control and standards. That's where we were moving towards. We were starting to look at architectural standards and where we wanted to go before the pandemic hit us. So I'm on board to have the discussion, and I think sooner rather than later, because we do have some developments coming up, and we want to make sure that we're setting the right standards. And like you said before to some of the applicants, bring their A game, because we're not going to settle for anything less. So I'm ready to support the meetings as needed.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'm along with Councilman Roth. That moratorium just worries me a little bit. I'm willing to have a seat at the table and have a conversation about what our next steps should be relative to development. So to answer your question, yes, I'm willing to discuss.
Good. Thank you. Thank you all for your input, and I will, again, work with the attorneys and Mr. Cordino and kind of try to refresh all of our memories and pick up where we left off and gather up the materials and meeting minutes and schedule one of those workshops. And quite frankly, I could think probably that they're almost a combination in some respects of what we spoke about earlier and the concept of a slowdown in the pace of residential construction, for lack of better expression, since moratorium seems to be a bad word. So I appreciate that. Thank you all. All right, my next item is tab 19. It's a discussion about what we refer to as the QALICB entities. And I know Councilman Shelley, Councilman Roth, Vice Mayor, and I think Councilwoman Bailey were here when, in connection with the funding and construction of both Homestead Station and the Cybrarium, these hybrid not-for-profit entities were formed as arms or agencies of the City of Homestead to comply or to qualify for some of this, what we've all heard, the new market tax credit financing. And quite frankly, until last March, when I was reviewing the comprehensive annual financial report for the budget year ending September 30th, I wasn't aware of these entities. And they were kind of a footnote in the financials that said, if you want further information, go get their reports. So I did, and I discovered what was going on there. And what concerns me today, it's concerned me then, but it's even more relevant now. And again, under the American Rescue Plan, with the grant dollars that are potentially available for not-for-profits, for museums and libraries and shuttered venues and to cities, my concern with the current structure of these entities is that I view them as they're city agencies, but they are essentially out of the purview of the elected body and are under, in effect, the control of, and I want to choose my words here carefully, a manager. I don't want to say the manager, but a manager. And let me get specific. The board of directors of those entities are composed of, with the exception of two, what they call unaffiliated directors, are all staff members of the City of Homestead. And it just so happens that the other two members of the board, while they qualify as unaffiliated, they either do business with the City of Homestead through their own businesses or, in a roundabout way, earn a salary from the allocation of city monies. So I don't really view them as really independent or unaffiliated. And my concern is not for things that may have happened in the past, but going forward with the potential to have qualification and be awarded grant dollars for both the Cybrarium and perhaps the Homestead Station project, that there's really, in my view, no accountability to the elected body for what goes on there. The board was initially appointed by a city manager and perpetuates itself. they name their successors. And let's be realistic here. Well, we'll be realistic and brutally frank in my opinion. If a high-level staff member believes that a manager wants them to vote a certain way in the management of that entity, it's going to happen. So I guess my question to staff is, and I understand these are very hybrid animals, do we wipe out the eligibility of these entities if the mayor and a member of council were named, the articles or the bylaws were amended such that there was council participation on the board as well as some oversight? Because as I read all of the documents now, it's really an agency over which the elected body really has no say or control. And for me, in terms of transparency and accountability, I have an issue with that.
Mayor, if I could just ask you a question so I can understand some of your concerns. Are you concerned with respect to grant dollars would be flowing through these QALICBs as nonprofits? And
I am concerned that, specifically if that is the case,
okay,
that could be really outside of the purview of council.
No, I understand that
But
concern.
big picture, as they exist now, they're off in their own little world with their board of city employees and financially connected others doing their thing, and it really never comes to us. And
Okay.
I understand that other than applying for and qualifying for the Homestead Station loan, there's really been no, and meeting those loan conditions, there's really been no activity. But I would hope that under these new federal dollars that may be available, that we could find a way that those entities could avail themselves. And in that event, I don't think it's appropriate they're kind of independent agencies run by the city, but not overseen by the city council.
I totally understand that concern, and I'll defer to my new market tax credit specialist consultants who can answer that, and I think they'll allay your concerns.
Good evening. My name is Gemma Torsivia, and just so you know, we have Jim Lang from Greenberg Trarg, who is the attorney for Homestead Station QALICB and who was the attorney for the New Market transaction, available on the WebEx as well. So certainly he can speak to this and speak to your questions as well. To be candid, the intent and purpose of the entity as outlined in the CAR item and in the agenda items when these two agencies or entities were brought to the city is specific and for only one purpose, which is to participate in the new market tax credit transactions. Governments, such as the City of Homestead, are not permitted to be recipients of new market tax credits. And so if the City of Homestead had wanted to pursue its own allocation, it would not be eligible. The only way was to create these special purpose, single purpose entities to receive and administer the funds and follow the conditions required for those funds, which are, I don't want to use the word minimal, but minimal. We do not have a full-time staff. We do not have a facility. We meet with our board one time a year as required by our bylaws. At that meeting, the board members review the financials. The financials are audited annually. We do a independent audit using Nova Gradic. The 3 years of audits, which are the 3 years of existence of this entity, are provided with the CAR item for item 3149. And you have a very part-time executive director, CEO, which is myself, Jim Lang, who's our attorney, and Chris Wang with Nova Gradic, who's our accountant. And we do what we are required to do under the terms of the new market tax credit transaction, full stop. This is not an entity with a goal or desire or purpose to do more than what we are obligated to do under the terms and conditions of the new market transaction. When the two entities were brought to this council, and again, I think it is helpful to look at those agenda items and look at those resolutions. It is very clear. It specifically says, here I'm looking at the resolution to form, this is the page 83 of this specific item. This is to form Cyberry Incorporated, which we created to pursue new market tax credits for the Cybrarium. It specifically says in the second whereas clause, whereas the City of Homestead desires to maximize the educational and cultural benefits of the Homestead Cybrary to the community and reduce the project costs to the city's citizens of Homestead through the use of the new market tax credits program, whereas the City of Homestead supports the creation of a non-governmental qualified low-income community business, or QALICB, as such term is defined in Section 45D of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986, as amended, the code, as a qualified borrower for new markets tax credits and a supporting organization to the City of Homestead. The language from the resolution for Homestead Station QALICB, which is the other organization, is very similar. I'm happy to read that as well, but it's on 86 of this CAR item. So the intent is the wildly narrow purpose. And the two entities were created to pursue these funds. To be candid with you, for the Cybrary Incorporated new market tax credit QALICB that was created, we have had one board meeting where we elected to not elect our bylaws since we didn't have transactions. We do not have a bank account. Candidly, everything I've done for it for the last 2 years has been gratis because it's been fairly minimal. I file an annual report, answer questions as needed here, and we were planning to disband it now that the Cybrarium is open, and we did not receive allocation. So we had been pursuing allocation until the Cybrarium opened. But now that it's open and the construction is complete, we are no longer pursuing allocation. So we renew every year in January with our annual report to the state of Florida, and we had planned to just disband it since it was no longer necessary to have and to exist since there was no allocation. And we would like to still do that. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the organizations and about the creation, but I just don't know how to be more clear. This is not an entity that is, and I want to be very clear, I am not intending to run this nonprofit to do anything more than what we are required to do under the new market tax credit program. This is not the United Way. This is not any other type of non-for-profit. It is very single purpose, and that is the way that we would like it to remain. We're just not set up for that. This is not that type of organization. It also is a supporting organization to the City of Homestead in that you have all the oversight that is available, and I actually think the fact that both myself and Jim Lang, and our CDE partners have made ourselves available to you for the last year. Every time you've wanted any meeting or to ask any questions, we got our CDE partners, who technically do not have to talk to us anymore since the transaction on their end is complete, to have a meeting with you, to answer your questions. So we meet once a year. You are welcome to come. Everyone's welcome to come. The meetings tend to be about 30 minutes. where we review the financials, we ask any questions of the accountants, and then the meeting is closed until the next year. So I'm happy to do whatever you want us to do with respect to oversight, but it's like trying to have oversight over a kiddie pool. I mean, you can see everything that's in the pool. We do an audited financial every year by an independent auditing agency. We work closely with the city. We provide our full financial statements anytime anyone wants them. We recently answered a public records request and provided all the documents, financial statements. So I'm happy to provide or open, quote unquote, the door to whatever you'd like, but I don't think this is what you think. This is not a water park. This is a kiddie pool, like for lack of a better analogy. You can see everything that's in the pool just by looking down.
But as an elected representative of the people, looking into the pool and having control of the water level, to use your analogy, are two entirely different things. And, well,
Sir, you are correct.
But I'm looking at Article 3 of the amended and restated Articles of Incorporation of the Homestead Station QALICB that were just done about 90 days ago, where the corporation is formed for charitable and educational purposes within the meaning of 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code, and organized and at all times hereafter operated exclusively for the benefit of, to perform the functions of and carry out the purposes of the City of Homestead, Florida, and shall exist solely for charitable and educational purposes under Treasury regulations. And, so certainly the purpose that was just refiled 90 days ago does not reflect that agenda item to which you rely upon from sometime in 2018. And again, I'll reiterate, because I think you're either choosing not to see it or deflecting. But as I see this, the articles of this corporation and that of the Cybrarium allow other activity. And there is the potential for both of those entities, according to their articles of bylaws, to act as not-for-profits and apply for grants, receive grants, and they are, in effect, part of the City of Homestead. Yet the council, while yes, we may be able to get to look at the financials and see where money went and where it comes from, that's not nearly as important to me as being able to have a say at that time as to where the money comes from or where it goes, rather than after the fact. And that, I think that may be where we differ. And I guess my earlier question was, given the organization of these two entities now, and I understand the stated purpose for their organization were to do those transactions and get those two projects as a vehicle through which to get those two projects potentially financed. They could remain in place, and as they exist now, are outside of the oversight of the City Council of the City of Homestead. And that is my concern.
Mayor, part of that concern, I think, with regard to what Gemma said, and the QALICB for the Cybrarium being disbanded, that there's no function for it. It seems that that's something, rather than renew, is something that's going to happen. With regard to Homestead Station, there's no intent for that QALICB to apply for any money or grants, because as Gemma said, it just exists for the sole purpose. So in terms of oversight, I'm not sure what you're envisioning. And I completely appreciate your concern as you articulated it initially, but I think the fact that, and I'll focus on the QALICB for the Homestead Station because the other one will be disbanded. There's no intent to apply for any of those grants or for anything to, despite what you've read out loud in Article 3. It was for that sole intent. And that money has, as Gemma said, the books are closed on the transaction, but it has to exist for a certain number of years. So, and no.
No, because you made this request to speak at this meeting, but I had planned to dissolve it this month before we were required to renew and pay the annual report fee.
But again, in reading through that 71-page summary of grants and lump sums that are available to municipalities and not-for-profits, there is a carve-out for libraries. And it immediately occurred to me that, hey, maybe this would or could be a vehicle through which those grant applications are made. And if that's the case, I think we need to have some direct participation in the entity.
Understood. And those 71 pages, which we've both looked at, the city can and will apply for those grants, including for the library. We would not do it through the QALICB. We would just apply for the grants. And I would suggest that if, in fact, the QALICBs were applying for some kind of monies for city entities, I agree with you. But they have one sole purpose, and it was for the new market transaction. The one will be dissolved, and the other will not be funneling any requests for grants or requests for monies. So that's why initially I said I think that in speaking to Gemma and or Jim Lang, it would allay your concerns, because there is no nexus there where we'd be pursuing that, nor should we.
So no refinancing, no other funding would be flowing through the Homestead Station QALICB. It would solely remain in effect to satisfy some of the loan conditions.
You can speak to that.
That is correct. And Mayor, again, and if Jim, if you want to jump in, feel free. Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is Jim Lang from Greenberg, Oregon. Very nice to speak this evening. I do believe that, at least in my mind, that the cyber entity is probably, there's no use for it anymore. And so I think that probably is a entity that probably should be dissolved. So I think we're talking really about one entity that has done now the new markets tax credits financing as the qualified active low-income community business for the city of Homestead. It did have a purpose provision that was more narrowly tailored in its original form as a supporting organization for the city of Homestead. It is still a supporting organization, which is a technical term under the tax regulations, a 509(e)(3) organization that is formed to support the city of Homestead. The recent changes 90 days ago were made to at the request of the Internal Revenue Service to have an expedited approval of that entity, which did broaden that purpose language slightly. And that purpose language was broadened. In fact, we just adopted the language the IRS asked us to do. The language that we had before has been approved by the IRS before, but it would have been a more lengthy process, and we thought that the tax-exempt status was more important for the entity at that time. So that was the nature of the change 90 days ago. I think that, or whenever that was, in January of this year, I believe. I believe that the board, when it was constituted for this entity, the thought was when it came before council and it also came before the city, that for the ease of this complicated and complex transaction, it was better to have this small board that had a small number of members that reflected the city's will. And that's why it was constituted and talked about with the city council at that time. That doesn't mean that that's what the board needs to be going forward in the future. That's really a discussion between the city management, the council, and everybody else involved, including that QALICB board at this point, which is controlled by the city. But that was the thinking at the time, and I think that was the general consensus at the time, was for the ease of the transaction, the people that were involved with the transaction, they understood what was going on here, and it was a more efficient process to have that constitution on the board. I believe, and I don't have the bylaws in front of me though, but I know that there are bylaw provisions for that entity that have controls by the city of Homestead over that entity. Long story short, that entity is just formed for this transaction to do this transaction as a supporting organization of the City of Homestead, and it can't do anything that the City of Homestead does not want it to do going forward. But if there are further controls that need to be put in place, I think that's absolutely fine, and the Internal Revenue Service isn't going to be concerned about that because this is a supporting organization of the City of Homestead.
Thank you. And, and I think you were privy to some of the conversations that we may have had about a year ago, and I hope you can appreciate and understand why this got my attention and what my concerns are, that, it was the will of, what happened there was the strong will of a manager, probably to curry political favor and sprinkle dollars all over the place, and I just don't want, while I'm here, that to ever be in a position to happen again. And I don't want to have the conversation as to whether or not those contributions were right or wrong or unethical. That's water under the bridge. I said I wasn't going to go there. My concern is going forward, that if they were going to be active, either we're going to be an active entity, that there be some more direct oversight. That was my concern. So what I'm hearing here tonight is one will likely be dissolved. The city can pursue library grants if we qualify directly as a city, and that there will be nothing, no further monies flowing or flowing from the Homestead Station QALICB, that's just an entity there to comply with whatever ongoing loan conditions there were.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, and I can give you my absolute assurance that if there were in any way, shape, or form something other than that would flow through that this council would be aware of it. And I would share your concern if it were for a city facility that there should be oversight. But it's just not the case.
Mayor, I do want to make one clarifying point. Funds do flow from this entity, but they flow under the conditions and requirements of our new market tax credit transaction. So we are required, for example, to make interest-only loan payments for the life of the entity, and those are prescribed. And if you look at the audited financials, it shows what we've paid, what has been earmarked for future payments. So I do want to be clear, there is very limited business that occurs and will continue to occur. And at the end of the compliance period, which is a 7-year compliance period, we will dissolve this entity. So just for assurance, and everyone who's been involved from the very beginning, when we first brought this item and the notion of a QALICB, creating a QALICB to receive these funds, we made it very clear that it was our intent to run this for the 7-year compliance period and then dissolve the entity.
Thank you. Councilman Roth, I think you've been chomping at the bit over here.
Actually, that was my question, because I knew there was a specific time frame that this had to be in place in order for the new market tax credits and all those things to go. And I understand your concerns too. And they brought up another entity tonight that we have very little oversight over, except for placing members of the board on their board, which is Homestead Housing Authority, which we have no control over how they spend their money and do anything like that. So we're 3 years into the 7 years, is that right? So more
Correct.
or less.
There's approximately 4 years remaining in a few months, but
Okay.
yes.
And it doesn't interfere by having this specific nonprofit in any way affect the city's ability to apply for or get other grants that may be available to us. One has nothing to do with the other. Is that right?
Yes.
Because I remember this process was a very, very complicated process. A lot of information. It took many, many meetings to understand the whole concept. And I'll tell you, the new market tax credits, it makes our code look like a child's book. So God bless what you did, Gemma, to get us through the process, because I don't know if anybody would have had the fortitude to do that, because to this day, and I'm sure I can speak for Shelley and Vice Mayor and those that were involved, city staff, we got a parking garage. in a movie theater out of this process. So, thanks for everything you did for us, Gemma. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilman.
Thank you, Councilman. Anything further on this, Councilman Fletcher?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just quickly, we had a telephone conversation, yourself and Gemma, this is about 6 or 8 months ago, and I don't have my notes in front of me, but I had asked for some certain things, and I wanted to have a discussion again, I think, with Mr. Lang at the time, but then COVID hit. We had a few issues. Can we follow up on those actions?
Absolutely,
I'd like to
yes, absolutely.
still have those
Councilman.
conversations.
Yes.
Because like Councilman Ross said, this is a very tricky, product. It's that level of book sitting on the table over there and a lot of different changing things. And it just, I need to make sure that I have the good foundation so I can understand it a little better.
We'll schedule that for sure.
Thank you, Councilman Fletcher. Any further? Okay. So let me digress a minute. I guess we need a motion to continue the meeting from 9 to 9:30. Moved and seconded. Are there any nays? Okay. I'm on my time clock here. All right. My next item is the Fair Housing Proclamation. It's that time of year again. Proclamation of the City of Homestead, whereas April 11, 2021 marks the 53rd anniversary of the passage of the Fair Housing Act, which enunciates a national policy of fair housing for all who live in the United States. And whereas the Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination based on race, color, creed, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, and national origin, and encourages fair housing opportunities for all citizens. And whereas the City of Homestead, the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, and certain citizens in the housing industry are working together to realize the dream of fair and affordable housing for all residents. And whereas the City of Homestead is committed to highlight the Fair Housing Law, Title VIII of the Civil Rights Act of 1968 by continuing to address discrimination in our community, to support programs that will educate the public about the right to equal housing opportunities, and to plan partnership efforts with other organizations to help assure every American of their right to fair housing. Now, therefore, I, Stephen D. LOSNER, Mayor of the City of Homestead, joined by the City Council, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2021 as Fair Housing Month in Homestead. And never has that been more relevant than it is now and in the coming months as we move forward with a new day in our community. All right. Again, I want to announce that there is one vacancy on the Homestead Police Pension Board. That vacancy is reserved for a resident of the City of Homestead. It's been advertised for a couple of months now. Also, as I said earlier to the speaker, there are 3 vacancies on the Homestead Housing Authority board that I intend to fill next month. I've made some inquiries. We have policies and procedures here as to when we need to get things on the agenda. Madam Clerk, if you would advertise that as well, with the caveat that one of those is reserved for a resident of one of the projects. And Mr. Roth, to your point, the way we have oversight and accountability is to appoint quality directors that understand what they're there for and what's put in front of them. And finally, there's been a lingering vacancy on the Planning and Zoning Board. Until today, until this appointment, there's been no representation from a resident who lives west of Chrome Avenue. Mr. Davis, who's been a longtime resident, who's retired major from Homestead Air Reserve Base, whose resume, if you read it in the package, is just phenomenal career throughout the world in 2 different branches. And I would ask that council approve my appointment, Thomas B. Davis, to a term on the City of Homestead Planning and Zoning Board. Moved by Councilman Roth, seconded by Councilman Fletcher. All in favor? All right. Thank you. All right, I have nothing further. Did we miss anything? I entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councilman Ross, seconded by Councilman Shelley. All in favor? Thank you all. Good night.